Okay, folks, welcome to the Critical Fitness Podcast episode. What are we on? Is this 3 or 4? Crap. Yeah, whatever. Okay, so today is going to be a big one. This is going to be a big, hefty one because today we're talking about diets and nutrition. Just going to be completely frank with you. Diet and nutrition is something that I have tried to steer away from for the most part. I've thought I'm going to probably do like just this podcast, maybe a video or something like that, but it's not something I really want to talk about too much because the reality is nutrition and dieting is not a hard science. And that's basically what I'm going to be talking about altogether is all the factors that people don't consider when they are considering what kind of diet they're going to do. There's a lot of people that for some reason are kind of like in the middle where they don't really know what kind of diet they want to do. They're trying to make up their mind. People ask me all the time, what's the best diet to take and that type of thing. And I always tell them that it's not a hard science. And so that's kind of what we're going to be getting into today. But basically, most of what I want to talk about and what I want critical fitness to be about is more about the stuff that we do know. You hear me talk about gravity. You hear me talk about all kinds of stuff that, you know, how your muscles and how your physiology works, because that is something that is much better understood. There's a lot of things that we don't know. But overall, there's just a lot more that we understand. Nutrition is not that. Nutrition is not a hard science. I keep saying the word hard science, and I want to make sure that people understand what I mean by hard science. Hard science and soft science, it's kind of a colloquial terminology. The hard sciences are going to be astronomy, chemistry, physics, biology in the sense of medicine, and not necessarily the allied health sciences, like, for example, what we're going to be talking about here, diet, nutrition, that type of thing. What's the difference between hard sciences and soft sciences? Well, just again, all 4 of those that I just mentioned are going to be really old, okay? The soft sciences are going to be the newer ones: psychology, sociology, economics. A lot of people like to think that that is an insult, and a lot of people use it as an insult. You might hear like a physicist refer to economics or psychology as a soft science, basically trying to throw shade in like an academic manner. When in reality, it just means it's more about the phase of how long we've been studying these things. You know, when you're talking about astronomy, that might be the actual oldest science in the sense that, you know, we've always had questions about the human body or whatever, but astronomers were more or less the first science where we basically gained the ability to measure and predict outcomes. When you're talking about the Aztec calendars, when you're talking about Mesopotamian calendars, when you're talking about, a lot of people don't realize that astrology was, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it was invented by the ancient Mesopotamians, not as some woo-woo bullshit to try and tell you whether you should stay in or whether you should date this person or not. It was more just, it was for mapping and astronomy, or I should say for like making compasses and maps. Most of astronomy and astrology in the very beginning was trying to understand, wait a second, there's a pattern to this. Why does the sun come up at a certain time? Why does the sun at this time of year go in this place and that place? Why are the stars in this formation? Why do we see the same things over and over again? And then eventually they started to discover different, the North Star and different, obviously it doesn't sound like I know what I'm talking about because I don't really know that much about astronomy, or at least not like, I don't know enough to be able to really speak on it. But the point is that they gained the ability to measure and predict outcomes. And still to this day, they're still doing that. You know, the actual first computer, depending on how you define computer, was invented by Archimedes like 2,000 or basically like 1,000 years ago. It was a computational device that he made that could predict where the constellations would be. And it was for ships so that if they lost their way, or basically if they, instead of losing their way, they could use this to calculate tomorrow where are these constellations going to be so that we can point our ship accordingly. Astronomers have been very good at predicting things in space for a very long time. And the most recent ones would be gravitational waves and black holes. For over 100 years, they've been predicting that there would be black holes and that they would be so heavy that they would have the ability to, if they were to merge together or anything like that, they would create waves in space that would be detectable throughout the entire universe. And what did they do? They made the instruments. They made the most precise instruments. And that's a big part of what it takes to be a hard science, is instruments and measurements and the precision of that. They made such precise instruments that they could detect gravitational waves. And they made a simulation of a lens the size of the Earth so that they could physically see a black hole. That's a big part of what it takes to be a hard science. You have to eliminate enough intangible variables And you have to migrate enough intangible concepts into the tangible that you can start making measurements. You can start predict outcomes and measure them. I'm sorry, I'm struggling to speak here, folks. I don't know what's wrong with me today. But you get the point. Okay, you develop these instruments. You make a prediction based off of the information that you've had, based off of measurements that were taken previously. You go out, you make new instruments that are even more precise than the previous generation. When you talk about what it takes to make these gravitational wave detectors, it blows your mind. I mean, I can't get into it, but the degree of precision that those physicists had, just it's monumental alone just to think about what it would take to make these machines. Same thing with these large hadron colliders where they're literally shooting protons at each other. The degree of precision that it takes to be able to make these things is so great that just the task alone is worth in awe. People focus so much on the results, but the task that it takes to make these instruments in itself is incredible. Meanwhile, we haven't even got our foot through the door when it comes to nutrition. When we name an instrument, name a tool, name something that people, we can maybe measure people's shit or things like that. There's not a whole lot. It's pure chaos right now when it comes to nutrition. A lot of people want to, like a physicist might look at somebody like a nutritionist and kind of like scoff at them because it's such a soft science. And again, it's just phasing. And if anything, I would say that these soft sciences are so much more difficult because you have to have a different kind of brain to be able to work in these fields when you're dealing with so much ambiguity, when you're dealing with so much intangible that a lot of these people, they like to think that they're very smart when in reality, they're just standing on other people's shoulders when they walk into physics, when they walk into medicine and that type of thing. It takes a different kind of brain to be able to be comfortable in an environment where you know so little. And in reality, I mean, the truth is that most physicists or what have you in all these other fields would admit that the more they learn, the less they understand about the universe itself. But I hope you understand what I'm saying is that it is not an insult to say that nutrition is not a hard science. But that being said, I mean, look, the truth of the matter is nutrition, especially culturally, what you hear most of the time is largely bullshit. And the reason why is because bullshitters love ambiguity. If there's one thing you should take away from this podcast, and it's why I'm saying at the very beginning, is that bullshitters love ambiguity. And that's why, especially with nutrition, I don't want to tell you what to do. I want to give you the information and the cognitive tools you need to make your own decision. I want to lay out concepts for you, and I'm not going to get too much into specifics here because I'm trying to lay out concepts for you so that you can make your own decision. There's a lot of things I don't do that for. Like I said, physiology I think is much closer to a hard science. This is why I just did a whole podcast talking about eccentric training and why I think 80% of people should spend 80% of the time doing eccentric training. Okay, measure and predict. That's a much more measurable science. We can make predictions. I could make a prediction and say, if you changed your workout regimen to be eccentric, that there would be I'd have to actually probably like try and plot something out. But we could say if 100 people switched to doing eccentric training, that we could predict a certain degree less of injuries when they play whatever. Let's say it's a specific sport, that type of thing. We could make a measurement. We can make a prediction for that. We cannot do that for nutrition, and that's why I'm not going to tell you to be a carnivore, to be a vegetarian, to be keto, to be high carb protein. I'm not going to tell you that. I'm just going to lay out for you information and talk about a lot of my own personal experiences as well. Bullshitters love ambiguity. That is why there's so much bullshit when it comes to diet. That's why all the Gwyneth Paltrows, all of the diet teas, the teas that make you lose fat, burn fat, when really you're just pooping more or probably sweating out your asshole or something like that. Bullshitters love ambiguity. You're going to see more bullshitters in the world of ambiguity than anywhere else. And this is one of the frustrating things about nutrition is that there's definitely people out there that are real scientists that are really trying to slowly but surely migrate intangible ideas and turn them into tangible, measurable ideas. But most people are just trying to sell something to you. Most people are just trying to take your money. Even if it's just a book, even if it's just whatever, if they're selling teas, if they're selling fat burners, whatever bullshit, V-Shred, Gwyneth Paltrow, you get the point. Most people, diets, cookbooks, that's another big one, cookbooks. Most people are trying to sell you something. And if they're trying to sell you something, that should kind of warn you. Now, obviously, I'm standing here, I'm trying to sell you something, but I'm trying to sell apparel. I'm trying to sell clothing. I'm trying to sell my designs. I'm going to hopefully in the future have inventions, not hopefully, I am going to have inventions. I've got inventions that I'm going to, hopefully help work on shoulder posture, work on hand strength, that type of thing. But I'm trying to sell you things that I believe are much more, well, not bullshitty. I'm trying to sell you things that are much more tangible. I'm not going to sell a cookbook. I'm not going to sell a fat burner. You're never going to see Critical Fitness. If we sell one supplement, if Critical Fitness ever sells a supplement, the only thing it will ever probably sell is creatine monohydrate, because that is the only supplement that is actually backed by science. Not even whey protein is as backed by science as creatine. So unless something new comes out that is as scientific as creatine, we will never, as long as this company exists, as long as I am in charge, we will never sell anything beyond like creatine. Be wary of people who are trying to sell you something. Hopefully you already know that, but also just always keep in mind, bullshitters love ambiguity. And there's a couple different patterns that they will tend to utilize. And I'm going to kind of talk about that over the course of this. This is going to be pretty intense. And also the thing about food that is interesting is for some reason, people take food very personally. So there's a lot of people here that are probably going to listen to this, and for whatever reason, people wrap food into their identity, which is something that we're going to talk about because this is really important. People wrap veganism, carnivore. If I make fun of keto, people think I'm making fun of them. Don't fucking do that, okay? If you feel like you're getting emotional, if you feel like I'm attacking you, I am not attacking you. Do not wrap a diet or a type of food into your into your identity. I'm just going to be completely frank with you. That's just very shallow. It's very shallow to think that I'm attacking you because I'm talking shit or saying the pros and cons of a certain diet or what have you. It's just food, folks. And you're gonna live a long time, and you're probably not going to be able to stick to a certain regimen your entire life. It's very shallow to think that because you were a carnivore for 3 years, 5 years, or 10 years, that your identity is being a carnivore. That's just shallow. So don't do it. I don't want any at-me's that are some emotional bullshit. If you've got criticism that is actually constructive or information, if I've made a mistake, leave a comment, email me, message me on Instagram, whatever. I am totally down for that. I'm always down for legitimate, rational information, critical thinking feedback. Go all in, please. Send me a 2-page paper. I don't care. Just keep me out of your emotional bullshit about how whatever veganism changed your life or something like that. If it's part of your identity, just keep it to yourself because I don't want to hear it, okay? This is the Critical Fitness Podcast. Like I said, I'm here to sell you guys apparel. I'm hoping to bring you valuable content. And if this content is valuable to you, please, I ask that you at least take a look at my website, projectcriticalfitness.com. My name is Antonio Jimenez, and as of October, I am the CEO, founder, and sole employee of this company. I do everything. I do the podcast, I do the graphics, I do the clothing, I make these designs. This one you're seeing here, the hat. If you're seeing this on YouTube or anything like that. This shirt I'm wearing, the Critical, and on the back it says, warning, untapped potential. I do the demos, I write the blog, I do everything. If any of these are useful to you, if it's impacted your life or if it's made a benefit for you, please check out my website. I think you're going to like what you see there. I got a lot of good designs. My latest design there is the Thyself design. On one side, it says, know thyself. And on the mirror side, it says, love thyself. So you can basically not really read it unless you look at yourself in the mirror and you will see it says, love thyself. Some people can see it. I'm kind of confused by that. Some people can see it and read the mirror version. Those people scare me and they should probably see a doctor. A couple people have looked at it and says, oh, it says love thyself. I'm like, you can read things that are mirrored. That's kind of either you're a genius or you're a psycho. I don't know what your power is, but that's crazy. I think it's one of my most beautiful designs. It's one of my most eloquent designs. I'm always coming up with new designs. I got the always moving. I've got new clothes. I've got shorts. I've got these trucker hats. I've got duffel bags. I've got all kinds of stuff. I can pretty much guarantee you that there is something on my website that you are going to enjoy. So go check it out. www. Why don't we even say that? Everybody knows. projectcriticalfitness.com. Check it out. If you can't afford to buy anything right now, that's fine. The next best thing you can do, leave me a review on the podcast app. Send me a comment on my YouTube page. Give me a like. Give me a like on my TikTok or follow my TikTok. Follow my Instagram or tell people. If you like this content, share it with other people. Not only one thing I'd like to point out is that it's a great way to support me. But just think about it. If this is valuable content for you, if you've learned something, if this is entertaining for you, wouldn't it be great for your friends as well? If there's something that I've educated you on that you didn't know about, wouldn't you want your friends to have that too? So please share this, share Critical Fitness with your friends and your family. And that's enough of that. Let's get into diets and whatnot. Let me check my outline here, because this time I wrote an outline, folks. Okay. In this episode, what we're going to do is we're going to kind of compare a bunch of different diets. I'm not going to be able to get into all of them because there's so many different diets. First thing I want to say is that there really is no such thing as diets. This is kind of a strange thing. People have this idea, and this is very important. People have this idea that I'm going to go on a diet. That's not what the word diet means. Diet means what you are repeatedly eating. So you are always dieting. You are never not dieting. This is important because what people think of as a diet really means that you are restricting your diet. Why are you restricting your diet? You're basically trying to cut down on variables. So it's not, the problem isn't that you are going to eat or not eat, or that you're going to have a diet or not going to diet. The problem is that your diet, for you right now where you're at, you've determined that your diet is too broad. There's too many variables. You don't have the discipline to, or the intuition, I should say, to be able to decide in the moment what you're going to eat when. So what you're going to do is you're going to cut out a ton of variables. That is the goal of any diet plans or restricted diets. You're just trying to come up, basically what it comes down to is a Moneyball strategy. A Moneyball strategy, if you haven't seen the movie Moneyball, is basically when you are dealing with an ocean of variables, if you can cut out even just one variable, it will give you a huge advantage. In a world where everybody else is just bombarded with different factors, different variables, if you can just get rid of one, it will give you a huge advantage. And so that is the main goal of every single restricted diet. Every single one, they all have that commonality. Is they're just saying, cut out this category of variables. Where it gets confusing is that people basically will try and just do a different diet that they saw somebody else do, not considering what their own lifestyle is already like, how their own lifestyle may work or work against this kind of diet. Folks, I'm sorry, my throat is starting to hurt, so you're going to hear me drinking a lot of water. There are three major concepts that you need to consider when you are dieting or choosing a diet, or designing a diet for a sustainable lifestyle. These are these factors. The number one is bio versus non-bio factors. All of these factors, I should point out, what's frustrating to me is that, a lot of amateurs don't consider these. What I find most frustrating is a lot of quote-unquote experts do not consider these concepts I'm about to explain. A lot of these people have PhDs. A lot of these people have masters. A lot of these people have been coaching people for years and years and years, and they do not consider these very core concepts. And this is why I'm not going to try and give you as many details as much as I'm going to try and give you concepts to digest or to consider for your decision making. Bio versus non-bio factors. Interestingly enough, almost every single diet, for some reason, they go all in on trying to sell you on the bio factors. Keto and ketosis, right? Keto is great for long distance runners. Supposedly it's good for brain power. I would say in my experience, I found that to be kind of true actually. Vegetarianism is less calories, and therefore you'll get, I guess it depends on how you're doing it. If you're eating whole foods, whole food vegetarianism, less calories and more nutrition. Carnivore diet, more protein, right? And so we're going to get more into the details a little bit about the different biofactors, but they never consider the non-biofactors. The non-biofactors, for example, would be, you might already be thinking of them. Like, so for example, how are you going to actually do this? How are you going to go to a barbecue, right? So one thing that's very frustrating for a lot of vegans is you hear these jokes about like, oh, sorry, we only made corn on the cob. And you'll hear both jokes. You'll hear vegans say like, whatever, dude, yeah, you're going to make a side dish, right? You're going to have beans. Okay, fine, I'll eat the beans. But then maybe they'll get there and there'll be like pork in the beans. And then they're like, oh, I can't eat anything. So everybody knows the whole dreaded situation of wait, you brought a vegan to Thanksgiving, that type of thing. And so you'll hear both jokes. You'll hear vegans be like, no, it's fine. I'm just going to eat the sides. And then you also hear jokes from vegans being like, wait, you guys seriously can't just at least make, I don't know, cornbread, something like that. Veganism can oftentimes be difficult to fit into society. And this is why you'll hear a bunch of vegan friends get together and have a vegan Thanksgiving and all that type of stuff. Vice versa, the carnivore diet by American culture, not a problem at all. In fact, most cultures, you could fit right in, no problem. European cultures, doesn't matter. If most people in America would say, hey, hold the French fries, but give me the steak or the burger, the brisket, most people would be like, maybe that's weird, but they just think maybe the guy just really likes brisket, right? In America, it is not difficult at all to fit in if you're going to do carnivore. I would say probably largely the same thing is true for keto. The bodybuilder diet of like high carb, high protein, maybe like you're eating every 2 hours with like maybe, I don't know, rice and chicken. That can be kind of weird. A lot of times those people are physically meal prepping and bringing their meals to the barbecue and that type of thing. And everyone's looking at them like, what the hell are you doing? So these are non-bio factors. Another one would be, what are you already doing? If you were raised in a family, there's people that I've known that they were borderline raised vegetarian, and somewhere along the line, they were like, dude, why don't I just go vegetarian? So going back to that restricted diet concept, what basically they're saying is, hey, I'm gaining weight because there's a whole group of variables like meat that I could just easily cancel out. So they're going with the inertia they already had. Vice versa, if you eat a lot of meat, and you're getting a lot of extra calories from French fries, which remember, so one big thing is you're cutting down variables with the goal of an energy deficit. So maybe you go, hey, I'm just going to cut out French fries and just eat the brisket or just eat the meat. And see if I can cut out just those variables, if that'll help me maintain an energy deficit. So consider bio versus non-bio factors. Don't forget the bio factors, but the thing is you kind of can't forget them because that's what everybody's always selling to you. Everybody's always trying to sell you the bio factors. This is what this is going to do for your body. And they usually oversell it. They act like this diet has some kind of magical powers to it, or that it's just so obvious, right? It's never obvious. Nothing is obvious in the diet and nutrition world. So consider those, but also consider the non-bio factors. What are you already doing? What's going to fit with your lifestyle? Because the less resistance you experience in your transition from your unrestricted diet to your restricted diet, the more success you're going to have. Second concept people do not consider is the 2 health filters. I'm actually going to do a whole video on this, the 2 health filters. This is just a huge concept that you should just remember for everything. All advice you hear related to health whatsoever, these are the 2 health filters. Is the advice you are hearing, is it for maintenance or you're for performance? You exist in one of 3 states. You are either declining in health, you are maintaining your health, or you are improving your health. Of those 3 categories, 2 of them take energy input. You have to work to maintain something, and you have to work to improve something. Only decline is the one thing that you can just let go. If you just let go of your life, if you let go, you will fall into decline. Your body will fall into decline. Anything will fall into decline if you let it go. So if you've chosen that you want to be healthy, you're going to have to choose between maintenance and performance. For most people, it's probably a good idea to start with maintenance. And then eventually, yes, I actually recommend that every single human being aim for the performance body. But I'm not going to get into this. I'm going to do a video all about the 2 health filters. Maintenance advice is always going to sound something like what you just need to get by. Or it's going to say something isn't bad. The classic example I like to give people is popcorn is healthy for you because it's low in calories. That would be maintenance advice. They're not telling you how to make your body bigger or stronger or do anything differently. They are telling you that this is less bad for you. Vodka is healthier than beer because it has less calories. It's not good for you. It's just not as bad as something else for you. That's maintenance advice. Performance advice would be things like, LeBron James eats 7,000 calories a day. Okay. Dwayne Johnson wakes up and he eats 7 ounces of cod and he eats 7 calories a day and he eats every 2 windows, right? One thing that's very frustrating is you will be bombarded with all this different types of advice for professional athletes, advice for athletes, advice for people that are trying to make their body the best that they can. And you will hear advice for people that's just like, hey, look, this is what you need to do to just get by. And for some reason, we just get bombarded with all of this advice, and it makes it very confusing, right? Like, oh, you can only just drink as much water as you want. Don't worry about hydration because your body will tell you how hydrated you are. That's maintenance advice. Drink half a gallon to a gallon of water a day because it will help you speed up your recovery time. That's performance advice. You hear how they're both actually true? I don't know about the first part. I actually don't really believe that. But yes, the scientific community believes that you can regulate your hydration just fine on your own. You don't need to worry about hydration. You don't need to focus on hydration. But if you do focus on hydration, yeah, you might probably see better results, especially if you're an athlete. You will probably recover faster. You will probably just in general feel better. And you probably will perform better in your sport or whatever you do. So both are true. It is true that if you're not an athlete and you don't really care, you can just drink as much as you want. Again, I don't personally believe that, but that's what the scientific consensus is. And it is also true that if you want to improve the performance of your body, if you want to improve your cognitive performance, if you want to feel better, then you should definitely try and drink more water than your body's telling you what to do. Both are true, but they feel like they're opposites. These pieces of advice feel like they're opposites because they're intended for two different groups of people, and nobody tells you that. So from now on, when you hear health advice, break it down into one of those two different categories. Is this advice for maintaining the body that I have and not improving it? Or is this body for performance or for improving the body that I have? So first concept is bio versus non-bio factors. Second is the two health filters. The third one is evolution only cares about one thing. And that is, can you successfully raise offspring? This would be, I think, one of the biggest things I never hear experts talk about or consider. And I find this to be very frustrating. When we talk about health, a big part of the reason why health is so nebulous is because people don't really think about what does the word health actually mean? Right? So again, going back to maintenance versus performance. Is maintenance health? Sure, you're putting energy in your body, and if you can successfully maintain it for your whole life, or for long enough to be in your 100 years or something like that and be comfortable, most people would say that's a success. Is performance health too? Yeah, you're going to work harder to make an even better body. Sure, but let's get into like the idea of performance, right? What does that mean? Does it mean that you are able to run around when you're 100 years old and kick a soccer ball, or when you're 120? I mean, that's my personal goal. This is going to sound crazy, but my personal goal is I want to be able to run around and pass a soccer ball when I'm 120 years old. I am not joking about that. And I think that these days, I think that that's possible. Even at the rate we are going without medical intervention, I think 120 would probably be a bit extreme, but I think at the current trajectory, I think it is actually within the realm of reason to believe that if you work hard enough, that you can make a body that can run around when you're 120 and kick a soccer ball with your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren. Is that performance? Or is performance being the best football player and crashing into other people and getting CTE? Well, that's obviously relative, right? It's to your goal. My goal is to live longer and be comfortable in the body that I have for as long as I can. Their goal is to try and make millions of dollars by throwing their body at other people. So performance is kind of a relative concept. This is important when we're talking about health in general. The idea of performance prehistorically would have been very different than like the goal I'm talking about now. 100,000 years ago, nobody was thinking about trying to live to be 120. That would be fucking hilarious to them. You would be an old man if you lived to be 40. The number one cause of death for all of history would have been childbirth. After that, I mean, just think about it. If you got a toe infection before antibiotics, that could kill you. I mean, they could cut your leg off, and then that could get infected, and that could kill you. You have so many variables working against you before modern medicine that the chances of you surviving to be 40 or 50 were essentially nil. Now, when we're talking about evolution, people think about, or nature and evolution, People like to overcomplicate evolution. They turn in all these different things, survival of the fittest and all this shenanigans. I would say even if you look up the Wikipedia article about evolution, I think it's just way overly complicated. Here's the definition. Okay, sorry about the weird cut. The stupid batteries on my Zoom here died. Never get Amazon Basic, folks. I think I've learned that the hard way. I saw in the news Amazon Basics are all a scam, and I didn't believe it for some reason. I thought that was fake news. Believe it, folks. It's a scam. Don't get batteries from Amazon Basics. It's fine. My throat was hurting me anyway, so I need to get water. Okay, so we were talking about evolution. So the definition of evolution, you're going to hear a lot of experts or whatever, is going to get really complicated really quickly. The definition of evolution that I like to operate with is actually extremely simple. It's basically one sentence. It's the history of replication. That's it. Evolution only cares about one thing. Can you replicate or can you not? A lot of people like to overcomplicate it, and they think that there's different advantages that are involved with, oh, it made this stronger or what. It doesn't matter. The reason why you're here and the alligators are here and the bola fish are here is because they could replicate. Alligators been able to replicate for 200, 300 years. Maybe, I think I overdid. I think it's 120 years. Sharks have been able to replicate for 400 million years. They're older than trees. The bola fish is the stupidest fish. If you want to have fun, go Google bola fish. It's the stupidest fish that ever exists. It can barely swim. I'm not joking. Other animals come up to it and rip its fins off. And it's just here because it pumps out 2 million eggs so it can replicate. If you can replicate, you're here. And as long as nothing stops you from replicating, you're going to be here. Nature does not care about you after you can replicate. So that's basically why we age. Humans are different in that we are, one, out of the food chain, and two, we demand so many resources to replicate. You've probably heard the expression, it takes a village to raise one child. A lot of people politicize this and they've turned it into something it is not. People do not understand the intense amount of resources it takes to raise one human. Think about a deer. When deers plop out, they run around like Bambi. They're like, what's my name? Okay, all right, I'm good. I'm gonna start eating. Can I eat that? I'm gonna go. They just go. Like you plop a deer out, they're going. Whales, you plop a 200, they're like 2,000 pound whale out. Boom, they're like, where's oxygen? I need oxygen. I'm a whale. They already know what to do. Sea turtles are like, that's the ocean. I'm going in there. They just know. It's crazy. And it's because they are so developed by the time they're born. People think that they're like babies, but compared to our babies, they're not babies. All these horses that plop out, elephants that plop out, able to walk, compared to our babies, they're not babies. They're more like toddlers. They take so much more time in the womb to gestate and everything like that, that by the time they're coming out, they're way more developed than our babies. Our babies literally cannot tell if they're shitting or not. They don't know if they're pooping or not. Our babies just scream. Think about that. Name another species where the babies wake up and just scream. Baby birds can tell when there's a predator. They wake up, they chirp, they see a shadow go over, they start chirping. Our babies, it would be a miracle if they didn't wake you up in the middle of the night. Our babies are so stupid that they just scream and torture their parents. Their parents, like, women go crazy. They're like, did I make a mistake? And they think about throwing them out the window and shit. Our babies are nightmares compared to every other baby. Why? Okay, first things first, here's what you got to consider. Again, the number one cause of death in all human history, the number one cause of death is childbirth, both for the baby and for the mother. Most people who have ever been attempted to exist ever died in childbirth. Okay, the reason why is because we have two different adaptations. We are upright, which means that our females, our women, have to have much more narrow hips. Okay, so gorillas, other apes or whatever, I don't know if gorillas, are they great apes? I don't remember. Wow. Anyway, other apes have wider hips so they can just plop right out. Boom, no problem. Our females have much more narrow hips. Even the women that you see that have great big birthing hips that you're like, hell yeah, let's rock and roll, they have narrow hips. And the reason why they have narrow hips is because it is virtually impossible to run around, to stand up and run with as wide hips as a lot of apes have. If you look at a female gorilla, their hips are so wide that they have very intense knee valgus. Their knees are caved inwards. This is actually why women are 8 times more likely to have ACL tears in soccer and a lot of sports than men, because even so, when you look at most female athletes, a big part of the reason why there's so much diversity in the female form and compared to men is because there's lots of women that probably back in the day would have been, for whatever various reason, in order to be able to replicate, maybe they needed to run more. Maybe there was just more situations that they needed to run more, okay? So they have more narrow hips. They wouldn't exist if this wasn't the case. Like, I don't know exactly what happened, but it wouldn't be possible for there to be women with wide hips and women with narrow hips if there wasn't a reason, if there wasn't a bottleneck that said, if you can't have this, you don't get to replicate. If you don't have this, you don't get to replicate. So clearly, somewhere in our history, through various tribes or different parts of species, there was requirements that large quantities of women needed to be on the move. And so those women have more narrow hips, and typically that's what you're going to see when you see Olympic athletes. A lot of those women, soccer players or whatever, they typically have more narrow hips than a lot of these other women that are more curvaceous or what have you. So that's why you see a lot of discrepancy with certain women like having that narrow waist and narrow hip, whereas women that are typically less athletic are typically going to have wider hips. Wider hips make your knees, put more lateral pressure on your knees, makes it more difficult to reach top speed. And when you do get a higher speed going, you can do long distance running. I should say that there's no mechanical advantage or distance. There's no mechanical issues with anybody being able to run 25 miles or 50 miles. That makes no difference. I should point out that, if you want to run high speeds, yeah, you want to have more narrow hips. But for long distance, women with wide hips, it's not a problem at all. Don't even worry about it. That's no mechanical difference. At least I should say if you're already strong and healthy. If you've waited a long time, if you haven't been doing a lot of running, then yeah, you might want to do some side booty workouts and things like that. It's very common for women to have knee issues if they have very wide hips because of their muscles in their hips being too weak. But if so a lot of women who have wider hips, they're going to have an advantage probably for childbirth, but they're going to have a disadvantage for running and things like that. Okay. So our females have more narrow hips, and we've got huge heads. Proportional to any other animal, humans have huge heads. Okay. Why? Well, because basically we traded brain power over everything, and it's worked out. But apparently brain power is so advantageous that it is worth having most people die in childbirth just to have a handful of people come out and work and have a working brain. Apparently it's worth it because we replicated so well that we're the dominated species. We are out of the food chain. We're so good at it that we're basically killing our own planet, right? We're suffocating everything else, and we're causing mass extinctions and everything like that. Like, that is how intensely good, how valuable having a bigger brain is, okay? So our brains are so big that our babies come out with, when you look at children, their heads are huge compared to their bodies. So they have disproportionately large heads, and we have disproportionately narrow hips. So it's very difficult to get our babies out. So it already takes a tremendous amount of resources just getting the baby out of there. Then you have this extremely underdeveloped baby. And think about this. It screams in the middle of the night. You already have to be, that basically is the difference between us and the previous species of, hominids or whatever. Oh, I sound like an idiot. Of the species right before us. Because in order to have a baby, you have to be developed enough that you're already out of the food chain and you don't have to worry about predators hearing you screaming in the middle of the night. You already have to be established enough that you've got fire, fences, people walking around in the middle of the night, so that if a bunch of lions or a bunch of wolves or whatever come hear you in the middle of the night, you can fend them off. It takes that's how many resources it takes just to keep a baby alive when it's screaming. Think about the resources it takes to feed them. You have to feed the baby, and you have to feed the exhausted mother. And the mother has to be, she has to have breast milk. So you have to have enough resources to feed basically 2 people, or 1.5, depending on how you want to consider it in terms of the amount of food portion. Then you can get into all kinds of other crazy stuff about what it takes to make the surplus and all that stuff. But then you have education. You have to have this thing that can't walk for a year. And then it, can, after a couple years, it can kind of move. And it takes for us, these days we consider an adult to be like 18, but realistically back in the day, an adult probably would have been like 15, right? Because basically life did not demand the maturity as much probably. They weren't driving cars and doing crazy shit, drinking alcohol. It was basically like, can you move? Okay, grab a shovel. Can you move? Go to war. Okay, so as soon as you have enough control over your body to start moving and doing things, then you're an adult. So that means that you have to replicate, and you have to be around for about 15 years after that. Well, what's that look like? It looks like about 30. Let's say you're going to go a little bit longer. That's about 40. Okay? So you replicate a bunch of times. You can try enough times. You start replicating when you're 15, 16, right? Which is probably back in the day what happened. Men probably started replicating later. I mean, like from what I understand, most of human history, women were starting to, basically were replicating at like age 16 or so, whereas men would be, typically they would be picking out men or whatever that are like in their like 20s or 30s. Doesn't really matter though. The point is that you're replicating, you're trying to replicate more, you're trying to have more babies, and then you've raised them. Now how old are you? You're about 40, you're 50 years old. Well, gee, isn't that about the time when shit just hits the fan, right? Isn't that the time when your body just starts to like rapidly atrophy? Yeah, it is. Why is that? Because you've replicated. Evolution doesn't care about you when you're in your 50s or in your 60s or in your 70s or anything like that. Evolution doesn't care about your body after you've replicated. We basically get a good run until you can raise your offspring. This is important for everything in life, but it's also very important for diets. Because as you're going to see as we're talking about this, one of the things that people don't really consider is they'll say, oh, such and such is going to give you cancer. Well, yeah, in your 60s or 70s, okay? It's going to increase. So red meat will increase the odds of colon cancer when you're in your 60s. Why? Because nature didn't have a plan for you in your 60s and 70s. We're making our own path here. We're coming up with this shit as we go. This has never been done before. There's never been done in our species. There's never been a species on this planet that operates at the capacity that we do for as long as we do. And this is one of the reasons why it's so fascinating looking at Cristiano Ronaldo or people like, rest in peace, Kobe Bryant, when they're trying to physically operate to in the top 1% at age 40 or whatever, right? This is hugely important for science to try and understand what it takes, because when you hear these things, when you hear like, oh my Lord, LeBron's going to try and play with his son. He's going to try and play in the NBA with his son. The reason why this is important for you in your life is because he's pushing the scientific boundaries. He's trying to operate in the top 0.01% at an age when nature stops caring about him, okay? And this is going to be relevant for you in your life when nature stops caring about you. It sounds depressing and sad, but I mean, I would like to look at it optimistically and say like, look, this is crazy stuff we're doing. We're doing crazy stuff here. We got people living to 100 years. And like I said, my goal, I'm not even thinking about 100 years. I'm thinking about 120 walking around. That's my personal goal. That's really optimistic to think about how far this species has come. That we are pushing ourselves well beyond what evolution intended us to do. But what that means in terms of diets is people get kind of loopy when they don't understand that, yeah, you're eating things that if you eat long enough, it's going to work against you. And it doesn't matter what it is. You could pick one out of anything. High fat, high carb, get diabetes from high carb, colon cancer from eating too much meat, everybody hating you from being vegan. I'm kidding. No, that's a joke. You get the point though, is that if you do just one thing long enough, you're gonna fall apart because nature doesn't have a plan for you after you're in your 40s and 50s, and vice versa. I would say this is basically the advice I'm always giving people when it comes to their physical health, when it comes to physicality. You can't just power lift your whole life. You can't just do marathons your whole life. You're gonna break down. You have to diversify. And this is, of course, something that you're gonna hear me talking about with the pros and cons of these different diets. But again, obviously, I just done a lot of talking about these three major factors that you gotta consider: bio versus non-bio factors. The two health filters. Is this maintenance advice? Is this performance advice? And nature does not care about you after you can replicate. In our case, it's about 50 to 60 years old. Nature doesn't care about you. Everything is working against you. Do not make a decision thinking that, oh, this will work against me in like 30 years, because everything is working against you. You have to diversify in order to try and beat nature and beat evolution. Now that you have these cognitive tools, let's get into some of these. The first one we're going to talk about, yeah, my throat is killing me. I don't know what it is about talking. Probably the dry air in here and all the cat hair in my apartment. All right, first one we're going to talk about is the simple one: calories in, calories out. All right, I know I said at the beginning, don't take this shit personally, but these people can take this shit personally because these people are the only people that really fucking piss me off. There's been this like resurgence of people that just like repeat this mantra: calories in, calories out. Calories are the only things that matter. A calorie is a calorie. These people piss me off so much for only one reason, and it's the smugness. And I know that there's a lot of other communities that are very smug, but these people are very, very smug, and they should know better. These calories in, calories out people, the people that think that everything is just like all about counting calories, a lot of these people are very educated. They have masters, they have PhDs, and so they should know better. It is way more complicated than a calorie is a calorie. This is what I like to tell people. Telling people that a calorie is a calorie is kind of like saying a gallon of gasoline is a gallon of gasoline. It's technically true, right? Does that help you? If I said, hey, I need to save money on gas. Yeah, well, you know what they say. A gallon of gasoline is a gallon of gasoline. Yeah, but I drive a raised pickup truck and I'm constantly coal rolling on people. Oh, yeah. But you know what they say? That wouldn't be very helpful, right? Like so what's the problem here? If you want to use less gas, drop the raised pickup truck and coaling on people and buy a Prius or whatever, right? So yeah, it's true. A calorie is a calorie, but there's a bunch of other factors around that. It's a very shallow way of looking at things. And again, I want to keep in mind, technically, yes, technically it is true. A calorie is a calorie. And technically, yes, it is true. You want to be in an energy deficit if you want to lose weight. Those are all technically true. But it's not really helping people because of how shallow that information it is. One of the prime examples that I think really this guy did a lot more harm than good was, I think this was 2017, 2018. There was a doctor named Dr. Mark Hobb. And he lost, I believe, 27 pounds over the course of 10 weeks by eating primarily Twinkies and just like random processed garbage food. And he did this to prove the point that a calorie is just a calorie. And if you are in a calorie deficit or an energy deficit, you will lose weight. Now, I will say there's a couple different things when people tell this story that they'd like to omit. One is he did supplement it with vegetables because he was going to die if he didn't. He did supplement it with vitamins because he was going to die if he didn't. Also, when he was done, he said that, yeah, he meant to prove it as a point, but he also mentioned that, like, this doesn't make anything clearer. This just makes things more confusing. Because let's be clear, you can't just live off of Doritos and Twinkies. Everybody knows that. Even people who try to do that know that. Even he knew that, and he did it for 10 weeks. So he basically proved, yeah, you can lose weight off of Doritos and Twinkies if you eat less. Good for you. Also, I think everybody knows that would be very, very difficult to do. I mean, think about Lay's potato chips. They literally advertised you can't just eat one Lay's potato chip. So yeah, go ahead. I dare you. I mean, he did it. You can, right? It's physically possible to lose weight eating Lay's potato chips. But just keep in mind, you're trying to eat something that they are intentionally trying to make you addicted to. Okay? And that's just the beginning of this. Now we're going to get into like a little bit of, I'm not going to get too hard into this one because I'm probably not the most qualified to get into this and I don't really want to. But also, again, this is just not what this podcast is about. This podcast is not going to be I like to get heavy with things, but I'm not trying to get into like, different chemical compounds and that type of stuff, okay? A calorie is a calorie is misleading because you have to think about what is a calorie. What is it? A calorie is a unit of measurement. A calorie means to burn enough of a thing until it increases the temperature of 1 kilogram of water by 1 degree Celsius. You take a Cheeto, you set it on fire, you put it under a test tube, and you see how much of this Cheeto it takes to burn, to heat up that water 1 degrees. Okay, what's the obvious problem with this? Can you think of an obvious, very intuitive problem with this? Is it that you don't have fire in you? You don't have fire in you. There's no fire in your intestines. You're not setting things on fire. When you burn a Cheeto and you see how many calories are in that you can use for fuel, you're burning the whole thing with just fire. There's no like, hey, what can we use this for? How can we redirect this here? What does it take to break this down? You are literally burning something else. You're using external energy to set something on fire. And then, you're just getting a total measurement of its maximum energy potential. That's it. Maximum energy potential. It doesn't factor in what is called energy availability. This is the thing that really frustrates me is not only would experts know about this, people who have PhDs who are telling you a calorie is a calorie, not only should they know this, but you actually already know this. Just think about corn. Okay, I'm going to just warn you right now. We're going to talk about poop a lot. We're going to talk about vomit and crazy shit because you can't really talk about diet without talking about poop. Sorry, folks, but it's the whole thing. It's the whole thing. It's one hole and it goes all the way to the other hole. In fact, I'm just going to tell you, I'm going to say the word butthole probably a whole lot. And I'm planning on doing a whole video all about butthole health because butthole health is real. But just warning you, if you got kids, I don't know if you're at the office or whatever, you're going to hear me talk about poop and buttholes and stuff like that because that's part of dieting, okay? So you eat some corn, right? Think about this. This is the classic example. You eat corn chips. Do you shit out little bits of corn afterwards? No. You eat tortillas. Do you see bits of corn in your shit the next day? What about corn on the cob? You eat corn on the cob, you're going to see corn in your shit the next day. Everybody does. Well, what's that? Think about that. You can set that corn on fire, right? Those little bits of corn, you could set that on fire and then it would have a calorie. That would be a caloric, that would be energy availability. But it didn't go into your body. Why is that? Well, it's because what processing really is it's external digestion. You already know this. Just think about cooking and processing, all of it. Just replace that word with external digestion. That is the whole point of cooking. You are externally digesting the food before you internally digest it. That is the whole reason our human species discovered and harnessed the power of fire. Probably one of the biggest jumps in human species was when we started cooking our food. Because think about what it takes to chew and consume raw meat. You're going to tear through collagen fibers and you're going to chew. Think about how chewy cooked steak is. That's some chewy shit right there. Now think about it when it was just alive and it's got dermal layers in it and it's got collagen fibers. When you're cooking a brisket, why is it so soft? Why is brisket so soft? Because you cooked it for 12 hours, right? You think about the incredible amount of energy that you put into your food externally, that if it wasn't put externally, you would have to compensate for internally. All that energy that you're doing when you're cooking your brisket, you would have to come up with all of that via chewing, via digestion. And if you couldn't do it, it would pass right through you. You already know this. Think about cows. If cows are 1,600 pounds, I'm 210 pounds. Most I think I've ever yoked walk with was, I'm going to say 600 pounds. And I could only walk for, 40, 50 feet, something like that. That means I could carry with what I consume, meat, everything I do, I had enough energy output to carry about 800 pounds for about 50 feet. Cows can do twice that for their whole lives, for years and years and years. And what do they eat? They eat grass. Now, what would happen if I ate grass? Could I lift 600 pounds? No, I couldn't carry myself. I would die. Why? Because the energy availability for grass is different for me than it is for cows. Cows are specialized for that. They have 5 stomachs. They have in my research for this, I looked this up. They have a giant, their first major stomach is called the rumen. And if you guys, this is crazy. You want to know a fun fact? So basically, here's how cows, one of the reasons I should say, it gets way more complicated than this, and I did not learn all of this. But fun fact about cows. Cows, they chew up all the grass that they can eat, and they fill up one of their stomachs called the rumen. And they fill it up until they can't put any more into it. And then they ruminate. You ever heard the term ruminate? Like, I'm going to ruminate on this. Let's ruminate on this, right? To ponder on something. Here's what ruminate actually means. Ruminate means to throw up from your stomach back into your mouth and start chewing on the same food again. It comes from cows and the rumen. To ruminate on what they do is they have to be so efficient with the consumption of grass that they vomit their grass back up into their mouth, chew on it, and then redigest it again. Yeah, how cool is that? You can't do that, okay? They have the ability to get maximal energy out of chewing on grass that we don't have, right? It's there. Clearly, the energy is there. The energy to turn grass into something that can carry 1,600 pounds for years and years and years, there is enough energy to accomplish that task. I can't do it. You can't do it. Okay? If you eat spaghetti raw, as in not like uncooked, right? If you eat rice, the dry rice, if you eat that uncooked, guess how much of that will actually go into your body? 30%, about 30%. 70% of that, you're just going to shit right out. You're going to shit out that dry spaghetti. You're going to shit. Hopefully it won't be dry when it comes out, but you're going to shit out that dry rice. If you were to boil those, guess how much you would have? 100%, or nearly 100%, I should say. Energy availability, folks. Okay? That's what processing means. Processed food means that more energy was put into it externally to make it easier for you to digest it internally. Again, just think about it. All the energy you put into it externally is energy you are saving internally. Think about celery. I know I'm beating a dead horse here, but this is, it's so crazy to me that people have been duped into thinking that like, oh yeah, you can just eat Twinkies or whatever, just eat whatever random garbage, eat smoothies or whatever garbage, because a calorie is a calorie. So I really, really want to hone this in. I don't care if I'm beating a dead horse. I'm gonna hone this in, which, by the way, beating a dead horse would make it easier to digest a dead horse. I'm sorry, folks. Anyway, celery. You've probably heard by now. Celery is negative calories. Do you think it says negative calories on the packaging for your celery? It doesn't say that. It says 15 calories. Why is that? Well, because basically the FDA and our regulators are stuck between a rock and a hard place. They could either try and guess what you and your individual body is going to use to burn the calories to consume the whole foods that you're going to consume, or it can just tell you what they objectively know, which is if you set celery on fire, this is how many calories it has. Okay? It doesn't matter that you are going to actually lose calories in the process of trying to digest. You're going to lose energy in the process of trying to digest oh, come on, celery. I can do this. It doesn't matter. They can't measure that objectively, right? They also don't know. I mean, for example, if you puree that shit, it's going to completely change the game. If you puree, because you're, again, external energy, if you puree your celery and you drink it in a smoothie, well, you didn't chew on it. So that alone means you're going to be losing that caloric, you're going to be gaining energy, I should say, energy and availability in that food there. So what we have here is this situation where people are thinking that processed foods and whole foods are the same thing. It doesn't really matter. When the reality is the more you process that food externally, the less you have to process it internally. Energy availability, folks. This is fundamental in ways that every single person knows. You already knew about this, and it's just somehow these snubby people have tricked Americans into thinking that whole foods and processed foods are just the same thing. And it's not. You weren't designed. I mean, I guess theoretically we were designed in the sense that, like, yeah, we made fire and then we started processing our foods externally a little bit. But to say that processing your food by cooking it a little bit and what Nabisco does is the same thing are two different animals. Okay. Now I want you to think about what actually goes into consuming food, right? What do you have to use? What kind of energy do you have to use to consume food? So let's take a look at my little notes here. Okay, for protein, how much energy are you going to have to use to retrieve the remaining amount of energy? So let's say in the case of 100 calories. In order to digest proteins, you're going to burn 20 to 30% of the protein of the calories in that food. So in other words, after 100 calories, when you're consuming protein, you're going to have left about 80 to 70 calories. Now, I should point out that that doesn't count for highly processed meats. A lot of times people like to throw meats, like processed meats like sausages and brisket, into the same category as more raw meats like maybe steak or fish or anything like that. Not at all. Stop thinking that bologna and all this stuff is the same. Because again, external processing. All the energy you put into making sausage is energy that you are saving in your body. Okay, so for all intents and purposes, I mean, I'm sure sausage takes more energy than, like, for example, raw sugar. But don't think that eating sausage or brisket is going to save you 30 calories for every 100 calories or 30% of the calories. Just don't. I should also point out that protein, this is part of the reason why protein is so satiating. When you're consuming protein, I mean, you know this. You start eating protein, all of a sudden you're like, dude, I'm not hungry. You get knocked out real quick. And there's a bunch of other things too. I mean, a lot of times we put way more sodium on our meats, and sodium can make you get exhausted from the same flavor. Salty foods. If you're just tasting nothing but salt, you'll just get tired of it. Maybe you'll stop eating more. But a big part of the reason why you get satiated so quickly is that your body's going, hang on. We have to digest all of this. Like, we have to actually make sure that we can go through this whole process. Because you cannot just keep pumping in, like if you're pumping in sugar, if you're pumping in fats, which here, let me just quickly go over. Fats, you burn only about, let's see what we got here. 5 to 10% for fats. So for 100 calories of fats, you're going to burn 5 to 10%. So you're going to be left with 95 or 90 calories left. Okay, and carbs, like sugars, are 0 to 3%. So if you eat, sugars, refined sugars, if you eat 100 calories of sugars, you're going to get 100 calories of sugars. And you know that because that's what a sugar high is. You already know this. You eat something high sugar, something candy, smoothie, a frappuccino. Does it take hours? Do you feel high in hours? No, it takes like minutes. Right? You have like a frappuccino, next thing you know, really quickly, you give it to kids, they start flying around and bouncing all over the place. It takes minutes. That is how quickly sugar, it can be digested and put back into your bloodstream. Okay? You already know this. Again, I'm going to say this a gazillion times. You already know this because try eating a roast beef before your next HIIT workout. Try eating peanut butter before your next HIIT workout. You're probably not going to do it. What do you do when you're really hungry, but you got your workout coming up? Most people, what they do is they get a smoothie. And I'm not saying that that's necessarily wrong to do, but you just got to be informed. You got to be armed with the knowledge that if you have 100 calories or, whatever of your smoothie before your HIIT workout, you're going to get all 100 calories in your body. You're not saving any calories with that smoothie versus if you were to do it in meat, raw meats that are not highly processed, you're gonna burn about 20 to 30% of those calories. So yeah, a calorie is a calorie. But how many calories does it take to burn those calories? I don't understand how we got so lost on this. I don't understand how it's so intuitive. I mean, that's the whole point of cooking. I don't understand how America got so confused by one experiment and a couple of snobby people selling diets into thinking that whole foods, processed foods, it doesn't matter. Just throw as many processed foods, doesn't matter. I've seen people talk about, I don't know, like different people recommending different like desserts because they're low calorie. Here's the other thing about processed foods and the calorie is a calorie, is insulin. pumping your insulin, right? I've heard people recommend white bread over wheat bread because it's less calories. That's great. Yeah, I'm sure if your goal is, if you have the willpower to fight through insulin spikes and insulin crashes, then go for it. But most people don't. Sugar is an addictive substance, and insulin plays a major part of satiation. Satiation and hunger is one of the absolute most complicated processes in the human body, and you're going to hear me talking about this a lot throughout this podcast. When you're talking about hunger and satiation, you're talking about one of the absolute most complicated aspects of the human body. There's nutrition. Sometimes people are hungry simply because they lacked a specific mineral. I've heard anecdotal stories of pregnant women eating toilet paper. Because a lot of times when women are pregnant, they're using so much nutrition to create a human that maybe one could be zinc, who knows? Maybe one mineral was so low that they just go crazy and they start doing they'll lick. I've heard crazy women like licking countertops and shit, like doing crazy shit because there's one nutrient that they're deficient in, and they're going into lizard brain mode, and they're like, we have to get this, or this baby needs this particular mineral. Okay, nutrition is a part of satiation. Hydration, right? Haven't you heard this before? Sometimes you think you're hungry when in reality you are dehydrated, which is a huge part of the reason why I don't think you can actually self-regulate your hydration as well as people think you can, or the scientific community thinks you can. Sleep, boredom. Boredom's probably the biggest one in this country. Boredom. People will eat out of boredom. People will eat out of trauma, right? People will eat because they've conditioned themselves to eat when they are have anxiety or they're dealing with trauma, that type of thing. Okay? There's a lot of different ways that people get hungry, but one of the biggest one, especially in America, is sugar, carbo dependence, and insulin crashes. Haven't you ever experienced it when you go to a buffet or you eat a ton of food or you go to a wedding and you wake up the next day and you're so hungry? You're crazy hungry because the night before, even though you ate tons and tons of food, you probably ate a lot of carbs, you probably ate a lot of sugar, and you spiked your insulin up super high. And then you wake up the next morning and you're just crashed. You're basically having a sugar hangover. And your body thinks, oh my God, I'm so hungry. Eat. My advice to people is drink water, drink coffee, and just weather the storm because you're not actually hungry. A lot of times people will think that they're listening to their body and they think that they're hungry. You're not hungry. You just confused the hell out of your body the night before. So don't go eating more. But you already hopefully understand what I'm talking about here. So telling people, oh, just get the lower calorie dessert or what have you, for most people in this country is not going to be very helpful. Because insulin dependence, or I should say carbo dependence, is a major part of the reason why people lose control over their diet. Sugar is an addictive substance. I'm not making this up. You can Google it yourself. Sugar is an addictive substance. Now, in terms of, I should say, one thing I should point out is the fake sugars, saccharin, aspartame, and all that. I actually am personally against them. I know that there's not enough science to say one way or the other yet. I'm personally against them because I think that the sensation, the taste of sugar is also part of the addiction. And when I have found from my own life that if I consume more aspartame and saccharin and stevia and all this bullshit, that I start to crave that flavor and that taste more. So my recommendation for people would be, if you're trying to lose weight and if you don't have the body awareness to be able to control and pay attention to where your appetite is and where your insulin levels are, stay away from those fake sugars as well. In general, I also think that a big part of the reason why American food is such garbage is because I think we blast ourselves so much with sugar. I mean, there's 4 tablespoons of sugar in a bowl of cereal. I mean, in the future, this is one thing I tell people all the time is, in the future, we're going to look like the characters of Mad Men with the crazy stuff we do with sugar. I mean, 4 tablespoons of sugar is going to look like Don Draper, pouring himself a scotch in the morning or something like that in the future. Like, the way we treat sugar is just absolutely insane. I would recommend cutting out processed sugars altogether. You're going to probably actually enjoy food more. You're going to enjoy more nuanced flavors. You're going to enjoy bitterness. Sounds crazy, but bitterness is a flavor and you can enjoy it. But you can't do that when you're constantly blasting yourself with so much sugar. This is a major thing that these calorie gurus, let's just call them that, calorie gurus, they chant the same thing over and over again, but they're not considering the bio versus non-bio factors. They're not considering the health versus maintenance factors. Okay? I'm not sure that evolution necessarily comes into a play with this one here, but they're not considering all the other complications that go into other people's bodies. And more importantly, really what it comes down to is they're just like every other diet in that they're technically right. They just have a very shallow argument, or even I would say a shallow understanding of what it takes to get people to be healthy. And for that, I would say that they're committing the same crime as every other diet. And I think that it's just so frustrating that, the other people will be smug about other diets, but this community is just so much more intensely smug about this idea of calories in and calories out that they just absolutely piss me off so much more. They get so many newbies. They get so many people stuck for 6 months thinking that they're going to lose 100 pounds by focusing on calories in, and then they fall off the wagon because whatever, maybe they ate only 100-calorie popsicle, but now they're craving more popsicles, or now they're craving whatever, right? Because they were eating processed foods that are designed to make you addictive. These people are trying to get you to consume as much of their food as possible. Nature doesn't want you to consume as much as possible. Cows don't want you to consume as much as possible. Plants don't want you to consume as much as possible. There's nothing in nature other than maybe fruits, but most fruits don't even want us to eat them. They want other animals to eat them, right? That's why there's cyanide in peach pits and things like that. Most things are not begging for us to eat them. The only thing that's begging for you to eat them is things made by humans because they're trying to fuel this consumer product that they have. So I would stay away from focusing on calories in, calories out. A lot of this other stuff, you can kind of make your own decision. Remember, calories should be your compass. And I like to think about this in two different ways. One is that a compass is correct, right? So calories in, calories out, they are technically correct, right? You do want an energy deficit. That is technically true, but it's kind of shallow. It's kind of like saying, using this compass, if I said, hey, I'm in New Orleans and I got to get to Rhode Island, so I give you a compass. Would that be very helpful? No. What's better than a compass? A map. You could have a compass, that's great. But you don't want a compass to get from A to B. You want a map. And that's basically what all these other diets are trying to do. They already have the compass in mind. Most of these people, you might find individuals that think that you can eat an infinite amount of food if you're on keto, or you can eat an infinite amount of food if you're intermittently fasting. You'll find individuals that do that. But most experts in these different communities are not pitching this idea of eat 5,000 calories a day as long as you intermittently fast. They're not doing that, okay? Most people start with the compass, calories in, calories out. And then they give you the map. These are the logistics of what it actually takes to make that happen. Because it's not ever as simple in real life to just focus on calories in, calories out. First diet we're going to talk about, or I should say, the second diet after the focusing only on calories, is the carnivore diet. Let me take a break here. So first thing we're going to talk about is the carnivore diet. What are the pros and cons of the carnivore diet? Well, the pros are pretty obvious. Let's talk about non-bio factors. Like I said earlier, in America, it's really easy to just fit right in with the amount of meat that we consume in this country, the amount of industrial farming and meat and our meat culture. You could fit in no problem. You can go to football games. You can go to barbecues, weddings, doesn't matter. You can go to a bar, and most of the time people might not even notice, right? You could ask for chicken wings if you want to be less processed. You could get, grilled chicken, that type of thing. Almost anywhere in this country, you can get meat consistently. And I would say the same is probably true. This podcast is meant more for Americans, but this is probably true for, Europeans as well. So it's really easy to fit into society in terms of non-bio factors with meat. Okay, less variables. Well, I guess that's getting into biofactors. So let's get into the biofactor pros. Okay, so obvious one, just like I said, is you're going to burn 20 to 30% of the calories when you're trying to digest meat. Okay. So that right off the bat, it's more satiating, right? You eat 100 calories up. Now, you might get into a trap where, depending on how you do it, you could get into a trap where because you think you're eating less than you are, maybe you start to sparse out. Meat is good in that it's very satiating when you're consuming it in the moment. But if you're like basically telling yourself that, oh, don't worry, I can just eat more later, and then you come back and you eat more later, I can imagine it being very easy to get into a trap where you're not in an energy deficit anymore. Okay. I should say that most proponents of the carnivore diet, and I've never actually gone full carnivore diet, but most proponents say that they can eat intuitively, which is really the dream, right? That's what people want. They don't want to be weighing their stuff. They don't want just the calories in, calories out. If you're going to focus on just calories in, calories out, yeah, you're going to have to weigh your food for years and years and years before you can start intuitively eating. If you don't want to focus on all of that, a lot of people who do this claim that you can intuitively eat and never have to worry about weighing your foods and all that stuff. I would say you could probably still get into trouble. And we're going to get into a couple different reasons for that why. But yeah, I would say that you're going to have an easier time eating intuitively if you're just going to do the carnivore diet, because like I said, it's more satiating and you're burning 20 to 30%. Assuming it's not sausage and brisket and bologna and all that stuff, yeah, you're probably going to have an easier time. Second obvious pro is that really good for building and maintaining muscle. I could tell you that is 100% true. A lot of people, there's a lot of propaganda out there. There's a lot of vegetarian propaganda, vegan propaganda out there saying that you don't need meat to be an athlete or whatever. Yeah, again, all of these things you're going to find are technically true. Yeah, it's technically true. You don't need meat to be an athlete or to be world class. Everyone likes to say that, yeah, there's that one vegan guy, I don't even know his name, who's a power lifter, or there's that one vegetarian guy who is a strong man. He's not like the strongest man in the world, but he's up there, right? Or he's in the top maybe 100 or something like that. He's broken some kind of world record. I'm sure there's plenty of vegetarian athletes. Most athletes are still going to be eating meat. And it's because of, performance versus maintenance, right? What do you need versus what's easier? What's going to be a better way to get more? It's more calorically dense. And also, in the case of men, and probably women too, it helps you build and maintain testosterone. I should say, when it comes to testosterone, I probably shouldn't even mention that, because most of the time when I hear anything related to testosterone, it turns out to be very iffy. But yeah, it is currently believed that eating red meat, or I should say eating meat and more protein in general, can increase your testosterone. However, consuming more red meat can eventually lower your testosterone. This is why I don't like to talk about testosterone, because as far as I'm concerned, it's mostly bullshit. We haven't really figured anything out yet with that stuff. But I can tell you from my personal experience, I definitely, even recently I've decided I'm going to start eating a lot more meat, because, in the bodybuilding world, they'll tell you to try and consume 1 calorie, or I should say 1 gram of protein for every pound of weight. So in my case, I'm 210 pounds. So I should be trying to consume something like 200 grams of protein, which is extremely difficult to do unless you're using whey protein and processed meats, or processed foods like whey protein and protein bars or what have you. If you've ever tried to just sit down and do that in chicken, that better be some really good chicken, because it's going to be very difficult to pound your own body weight in grams of protein. I will say this, though. This is the second time around I've gone around trying to do that. And yeah, I feel a lot better. I work out 6-7 days a week. If you're not at that level, this may not be great advice for you. But I've definitely found that I perform better in the sports that I play. I feel better when I try to consume as much protein as I can, especially if it's whole foods protein. If you can do the whole vegan and take a bunch of supplements and be really scientific about it, good for you. But for most people, most of the time, if you want to perform, if you want performance lifestyle, yeah, you're going to need to eat a lot of protein. You could try and get it in a couple different ways. A lot of times people like to overhype nuts and vegetables. You can get protein from vegetables or whatever, but nothing's going to come close to what you can get in chicken breast. And that's the other big thing, is a lot of meat eaters tend to focus on red meat. You're really honestly probably better off eating chicken, turkey, fish. Fish would be the biggest one, especially if it's wild caught fish, because Farm caught fish probably doesn't have as much omega-3s. And omega-3s are huge, folks. I cannot emphasize enough how important omega-3s are, especially for Americans. But yeah, I mean, for my own personal life, I have found you got to eat more protein. If you want to be working out every day, if you want to get bigger and stronger, protein helps you get bigger and stronger, and it helps you maintain the strength that you have. So that's a very obvious pro when it comes to it. It's a lot easier to try and accomplish that same task with meats and proteins, or I should say just meats, than it is with the vegetarian and vegan lifestyle. Another obvious pro would be there's a lot of conditions out there that it can help you out with, right? So the obvious ones would be like celiacs, anything where you're, or gluten intolerance, which, by the way, I should point out that celiacs may be a much bigger deal than people thought. I for myself, hang on one second. I for myself thought that the whole gluten thing was a joke. I thought that there was all these idiots running around trying to avoid gluten. I was just like the most public Jimmy Kimmel and all these people doing all these sketches where they're making fun of people scared of gluten. I thought it was all a joke. I'm actually increasingly becoming concerned about gluten as well, because I did not realize that the common consensus among experts is that most people who have celiacs are actually not diagnosed. They also don't fully understand where celiacs comes from, but it is believed that it is a combination of genetic aptitudes for the disease and then also being developed from overconsumption of gluten. So in other words, you may actually not know it, but you have the genetic aptitude to develop celiac disease, and then you basically trigger it from overconsumption of gluten, which I would say makes sense because celiac disease is an autoimmune disorder, and a lot of these autoimmune disorders appear to essentially be triggered by your body being confused over a period of time from, whatever it is. So I'm not going to get into that too much because I'm not an expert. I'm not a medical expert. So you probably do your own research, talk to your own doctor, that type of thing. But yeah, I know for myself, I'm definitely going to start cutting out on gluten and all of that. And I definitely feel like I feel better. Not a hard science. So that I can only tell you my personal experience. Another major thing would just be allergies in general, right? So if you're eating a lot of processed foods, if you're eating a lot of various different types of vegetables, you're just increasing the likelihood that you're going to run into an allergy or something that you don't know. Meats, there's not really that many type of meats, and they're also more similar in terms of the chemical makeup. Only allergy that I know of is, there's people who are allergic to meat. If you get the Lone Star tick from Texas, you'll be allergic to meat for probably like 30 years of your whole life, and that would suck a whole lot. But for the most part, nobody's really allergic to meat at all. So, those are pre-existing conditions. Supposedly Parkinson's, it's good for that. Epilepsy, it's good for that. I would do your own research on that, but I've heard anecdotal evidence about those things as well. Okay, looking through my notes here. Okay, what are the cons? All right, biggest con, diarrhea. Get ready for diarrhea. There's a lot of different ways you can get diarrhea, and carnivore covers about all of them. The carnivore diet can give you diarrhea, first and foremost, because you're not consuming fiber, because you're not a real carnivore. This is the thing that's so funny to me about the carnivore diet. And again, don't take this personally, folks, but I don't get it. You're not a carnivore, you're an omnivore. We're not one thing. We're opportunistic eaters. And if you were a real carnivore, you'd be getting fiber. You'd be eating collagens. You'd be ripping, look at lions and stuff. Look at what they're doing. They're ripping. Think about a lion, 200, 300, 400 pounds. Look at their muscles as they're ripping apart raw meat. That's a carnivore, folks. A carnivore isn't going to Qdoba and getting 12-hour brisket. That's not that's a real carnivore. You have to chew through and tear things apart. Okay, you're eating eyeballs. You're eating the whole thing. You're eating the brains. You're eating the liver. Most of these quote-unquote modern-day carnivores are not doing any of that. Okay, so, that's a major flaw in a bunch of different reasons. The big one is, why are you getting diarrhea? A big part is you're not having any fiber in your diet. So you're either going to be constipated or you're going to be runny, both of which are not good. You need fiber in your diet for a bunch of different reasons. If you don't have fiber, you're going to run into all kinds of trouble. Okay? Next major flaws, you're going to have diarrhea because you're starving out all of the gut biome. So your gut biome in your intestines is bigger and more diverse and more complicated than probably anything else in the human body. That's why they call it the new brain. The diversity of bacteria in your gut is insane. There's a bigger difference between your gut bacteria than there is between you and another person's fingerprint. Okay, the difference, you are more unique in your gut bacteria, but between that and your personality, the way you look, everything like that, pales in comparison to the diversity that each individual has in their gut biome. And the way you maintain that is through what you eat. If you're eating pizza and chicken nuggets, you're gonna make a shitty pizza and chicken nuggets gut biome. If you're eating vegetables, or if you ever ate vegetables, you're going to have some of your bacteria, the gut biome in your intestines dedicated to that. But if you just eat carnivore, if you only eat meat, then all of that bacteria in your intestines that specialize in eating vegetables, they're going to die out. And when they die out, they're going to make you pay for it. That's a huge part of the reason why your gut is so deeply connected to your brain. You see, a lot of times people feel miserable because of the literal neurotransmitter connection that the bacteria in their intestines have to their mind. When they're happy, they emit more serotonin, or they communicate with your brain to emit more serotonin and make you relax. And when they're upset, they basically restrict dopamine and make you feel like shit. Okay? What those bacteria in your intestines do not go without a fight, and they will make you pay for it. They will make you pay for it with diarrhea, and they will make you pay for it with maybe depression, making you feel angry. There's a bunch of different things that they can do to you. They're in there. They're like, it's like they're taken hostage. They're going to make you pay for it. The way you pay the toll for this gut biome is primarily through fiber. Okay? Yeah, you're probably going to have biome, you're going to have bacteria. I should just say bacteria. You're going to have bacteria in your intestines that are going to specialize in eating meat and what have you. But mostly what they're trying to do is they're trying to eat fiber, because that is the symbiotic relationship that we have with this bacteria. At least that appears to be what we currently understand. We don't actually use fiber. Our body does not use the fiber to build. If you're eating collagen, you're not going to really be using collagen to build your body. It doesn't go into the rest of your body. You use different, you use proteins, you use different, you break down chemicals into amino acids and you rebuild them back up through the rest of your body. You're not using fiber. The reason why you need fiber is because, one, it's holding that food together while it's going down your gastrointestinal tract, your GI tract. It's holding that together so that you can get even more nutrients. Because the slower it goes through your GI, the more nutrients you can get out of that food. And the second reason is to pay the toll. The reason why the symbiotic relationship that we have with the bacteria in our intestines is that we are paying them. They feed off of the fiber. So if you're not paying them, you're going to suffer. Okay, just think about The Sopranos or anything like that. Or I don't. Just think they're gonna make you suffer. Okay. Next reason why you're gonna have diarrhea: vitamin deficiencies. Okay, that's a no-brainer. Especially because, again, you're not a real carnivore. If you're a real carnivore, you're gonna eat the liver. Fun fact, and this is kind of works against vegetarians: the most nutritious food you can eat per pound is herbivore liver. You can't eat carnivore livers because that'll kill you. But herbivore livers are the most nutritious pound for pound foods you can eat, especially if it's like a cow or anything that has a diverse diet, probably more like a horse or a deer or something like that. It makes perfect sense, right? It's the filtration part of your body. So it's collecting up all these random molecules, these random minerals. So it's going to have the most diversity of nutrients in the human body. I doubt that most modern carnivores are eating liver, right? They're probably not going out and having liver and onions. If you are, great, good on you. You're probably going to be able to do a lot longer than most people will. And that's basically what it's going to take. If you want to be a true carnivore for years and years and years, you're going to have to do crazy stuff. You're going to have to eat brains. You're going to have to eat eyeballs. You're going to have to eat livers, because that's what it takes to be a real carnivore. How do you think lions get away with it? You think that they just eat protein? No, they need nutrients too. They're just getting it from different parts of the body than we are. We just eat the same thing over and over again. We eat the ribs. We eat the shoulder. We eat the butt cheeks. We just eat the same thing over and over again. We don't eat the parts that have the real nutrition. We're not eating the cartilage. We're not eating spinal fluid and all kinds of crazy stuff. If you want to be a real carnivore, that's what it takes. You got to really tear through the whole animal like a real carnivore would. Very common for carnivores to have magnesium deficiencies because magnesium is very low in meats. You can pretty much mostly get magnesium from things like, I believe, cucumbers, spinach, greens, that type of thing, but mostly vegetables. Magnesium is hugely important, especially for Americans, because most Americans are deficient in magnesium. If you don't have magnesium, you can suffer from things like restless leg syndrome. Restless leg syndrome is one of the surefire signs that you are deficient in magnesium. If you've ever experienced restless leg syndrome, what's it like? It's like your legs are just like, they just won't stop firing off. They won't stop like swinging around, and it's really, really annoying, and it can make it difficult to get sleep. Why is that happening? Because you need magnesium to relax your muscles. For long-term activation of your muscles, you use calcium. For long-term relaxation of the muscles, you use magnesium. Most Americans are deficient in magnesium, and so it inhibits their recovery. So all those gains that you're making in your strength from consuming all that meat, you're probably going to lose if you only eat meat for a long period of time because you're not recovering because you're not eating magnesium. And other things I should point out really quickly is if you have a pre-existing kidney issue, eating too much meat, especially if it is red meat, can worsen your kidney issue. I believe the same goes for your liver. Of course, if you already have pre-existing conditions, I hope you're talking to your doctor about that and not seeking advice from a random guy off of the internet. Another issue would be the increased risk of colon cancer. I'm going to do a whole video about risk and how to consider risk or whatever. But remember, like I said, all of these are going to have a drawback. If you don't have a diverse diet, if you stick to one restricted diet, a very restricted diet, then eventually you're going to run into your issues in your 50s or 60s because nature doesn't care about you in your 50s and 60s and 70s. So if you don't diversify and you put all of your eggs in one basket, you're going to run out of luck eventually. So obviously I hope you can tell I am not a fan in the carnivore diet in the sense that just like anything else, extremes are not a good idea. I don't think for most people, most of the time, you should be doing the carnivore diet. But again, that's up to you. Maybe you only want to do it for 6 months because that's what it's going to take to get you through that initial hurdle. Okay? Maybe you already eat a ton of meat and the other calories you're consuming are from French fries or whatever. Look, I think I would say, though, this, if you want to eat more meat, great. Supplement it with salad, supplement it with vegetables, okay? Don't just cut out vegetables altogether. I don't think that's a very wise idea. We are not carnivores. We're not carnivores. We are opportunistic eaters. We're omnivores. There's a reason why we have incisors and we have molars, because we're designed for chewing both. And we're not even that good at chewing raw meat, obviously, okay? So if you're going to do it, try to be smart about it. And I would recommend don't do it for too long. Next big one would be keto. You could kind of say Atkins in this, but we're going to stick to keto. You're going to notice I'm going to be skipping over some other ones. Atkins is not a really big one anymore. The difference between Atkins and keto is Atkins was low carb, but it wouldn't necessarily trigger what's called ketosis, whereas keto is all about ketosis, okay? So what's keto? What's ketosis? Keto is so basically here's the general gist is that most people, like I said, are they are carbo dependent. Okay, most people in America are addicted to refined carbohydrates. That's just the fact, okay? You're eating refined sugars, it's spiking your insulin up, you're crashing, then you feel hungry again. I know this from personal experience. There was a time in my life when I had so little money that for weeks on end, all 3 meals a day I was eating was just rice. Sometimes butter with my rice, mostly just rice. I can tell you from personal experience, do not do that. It is a bad idea. There's a reason why the biggest meal in the world is rice and beans, and it's not just rice. Because if you eat nothing but rice, you are going to be miserable. And I don't mean just for the taste or whatever. I mean, you will become dependent on carbohydrates. And in my case, I was probably hyperglycemic or hyperglycemic. And what was happening was I was getting so hangry, I was crashing so hard that not only was I becoming furious and irrational, but my vision would become blurry and I would have to lean on tables to feel like I wasn't going to. This would be like in intervals of 2 or 3 hours. Okay, so I would be at work and I'd be like a 2 hour, I'd basically like eat right before work have 2 hours, and after 2 hours, I was crashing so hard that I would be like, look, I need to go for my break, even if it's early. Can I go for my break early? And then I would go down and I'd eat some more. I basically put myself into such a deep, vicious cycle. I remember it was a huge problem. It was a huge problem for my life. And I wasn't educated on the matter, as educated on the matter as I am now. And so it became a major problem in my life. Me trying to figure out the logistics of how do I have rice? How do I have food ready? Because I'm just constantly extremely hungry all the time. And yeah, it got to the point where I basically was like losing vision when I would crash so hard and eat, come back. And somewhere along the line, I'm like, okay, something needs to change. And this is what, when people are at the restaurant and they're waiting for their food and they're getting more and more angry at the waiter, and then suddenly they get bread and all of a sudden they're back to normal and things like that. That's what this is. America is dependent on refined carbohydrates. It's making people sick. It's making people act crazy. It's very real, folks, and it's a real danger to this country. And once again, people who are telling you to just worry about calories and whatnot, they're not telling you the whole story, because you can definitely, you'll see bodybuilders complain about it all the time, about how they have to eat every 2 hours and how hungry they are the whole time. And a major part of that reason is because it doesn't have to do with the feeding window. They think that their metabolism is faster because they're eating every 2 hours. That's not true, folks. Your metabolism doesn't go faster or slower. Just think about, what I know I'm going on a little bit of a tangent here, but I just want to tell you something. Just think it through. When people think like, oh, if you eat in the morning, it makes your metabolism go faster. Oh, if you eat every 2 hours, it'll make your metabolism go faster. I'm sure there's like a little bit of evidence for it, but it's not true. Just think about the logistics of this. What is metabolism? It's getting the food that you've consumed into the mitochondria of all of the cells in your body. So you think because you're eating every 2 hours that there's like more ATP, there's more energy, there's more glucose in your toe? Because you eat breakfast in the morning, by the time it's 11 o'clock, your pinky, the cells in your pinky, the mitochondria in your pinky have more. This process takes a long time. That's one of the biggest things. And I think a big part of it is because these stupid movies, like, the latest James Bond movie where like they give them an infection and it kills them immediately, right? Like movies have trained people to think that that a lot of things that you can just consume something and it'll have this immediate effect and it'll like make you big and strong or whatever. Drugs can do that. Sure. Yeah. You can inject something into your blood and it'll have an immediate effect. That's because that's what they're designed to do. They're making these things to intentionally bypass your body. There's a couple of other foods, right? There's literally a portal vein. I'm not joking. It's called a portal vein in your stomach that goes to your liver. And if you eat MCT oil, yeah, that'll go straight to your liver, right? That'll go straight through. But most things, right? You can have a chemical reaction. You can have alcohol. You can have dopamine released into your brain and that type of thing. But most things, when you're talking about metabolism, you're talking about something that takes a very long time. And more importantly, just think about the logistics of how could our species operate if you didn't eat breakfast, right? 100,000 years ago, do you think that they were eating 3 meals a day? No, they were eating when they had food. It's not like they shut down because they didn't have breakfast. Our bodies are not designed off of this, like eat every 3 hours or so, which actually, if anything, it's the exact opposite. Our bodies probably improve based off of not doing that, which is something we're going to talk about later. But yeah, if you're thinking like, eating breakfast speeds up your metabolism or whatever. No, it's just insulin crashes, folks. It's just the hormones. It's just leptin and ghrelin. It's a bunch of other things too. It's probably conditioned response that you've created. But I can tell you, as somebody who does not eat breakfast, I'm not hungry in the morning, right? I will be hungry though if I have an insulin crash because I ate an ice cream sundae the night before. But most of it's just, you've conditioned yourself to eat at certain windows. You're having insulin spikes and crashes, and probably the foods that you're eating are just generally more addictive. Okay. So going back to my personal story, rice and refined carbohydrates was making my life spin out of control. So without knowing about keto, this would have been probably like 2013, 2014, like right as this stuff was getting really big. Without knowing about keto, I started like doing experiments. I was eating more chicken and broccoli. And that helped, right? That's like the bodybuilder diet, chicken and broccoli. Protein's more satiating. But I still had this weird like, oh my God, I'm so hungry. Like, and I had to eat like every 2 hours or have hard-boiled eggs and everything like that. And for my job, I was working in retail. I couldn't have regular feeding hours. At the job I was working at the Apple store. My hours would be all over the place. Some days I'd have to wake up at 5 a.m. and some days I'd have to get to work. I wouldn't leave until 11, right? I'd have to get there, work 7 to 4. Some of my shifts would be 1 to 10. So I couldn't have regular feeding windows. So I really needed to figure this out because I was in the middle of like between breaks and things like that. I was just getting so hungry and it was making me angry and everything like that. And eating chicken and broccoli did not help, even though chicken helps with satiation and all that. Eating more chicken didn't help. That was one of the first things I did. It was just like, fuck it, let's try eating more chicken. Didn't help. So then I started doing something kind of freaky, which is that, yeah, this is kind of weird. I would buy like 1 or 2 pounds of hamburger meat. And I would cook it, maybe make meatballs, maybe just grind it up. And I would eat it all in one sitting. I would just imagine me in front of the TV with 1 pound or 2 pounds of hamburger meat. And I would just eat it. And it didn't, for some reason, I could just do that. I could just consume 1 or 2 pounds of raw meat. Want to point out though, again, hamburger meat, processed. So it's a lot easier to just pound through, 1 pound of hamburger meat than it is to chew through, steaks or anything like that, because it's already been ground up for you and everything like that. So I would do this, I would eat it, and lo and behold, what would happen is all the hangriness, all of it would be gone for like 2 days, like 1 or 2 days, basically. The next day, I would have no problem in between breaks or anything like that. At first, I thought that it was just because I was consuming so many calories in a short period of time that I basically was like, okay, I've eaten enough. I definitely was like, I was probably eating like 4,000 calories or something like that. But I thought that basically that was what my body actually required. That was the number of calories that my body actually required. Somewhere along the line, though, I started to figure out, hang on, that's not what's going on here. It's the fat content, because hamburger meat is typically 20% fat, especially if you're getting the cheapest kind, which is what I'm normally doing. All of that fat changed the way my body was distributing that energy throughout the day. I probably wasn't in ketosis, but what I was running into was ketosis. That's the idea of keto. The idea of keto is to be the exact opposite. To stop being hungry all the time because of refined carbohydrates or maybe even carbohydrates from like broccoli or whatever, making you spike and crash all the time. So again, restricted diets, cutting out variables, right? So you're not going to be eating sugars. You're not going to be eating ice cream. You could probably eat something creamy and heavy, but you're not going to be eating bread. You're not going to be eating rice. You're not going to be eating pasta because that's going to kick you out of ketosis. Ketosis is when your body switches into purely burning fat rather than trying to burn through the glycogen stores in your muscles. The idea here being that when you're eating nothing but carbohydrates, you've trained your body to burn through carbohydrates, and then unfortunately your body gets confused and it starts burning muscle tissue and not the fat. This kind of makes sense when you see certain athletes or what have you. Why are there fat people that can run, or not fat people, I should say, why are there like chubby people that can run marathons and things like that? It's because they're burning through carbohydrates and they're not burning through the fat. Okay, or at least that's the idea. And this is more or less what has turned out to be true, because the keto diet, well, we'll get that into a moment. But really quickly, I just want to summarize my personal experience with keto because I have tried it. And I like it a lot. It's not the end all be all, but I like it a lot. And the reason is because when I made the decision to just try full on keto was actually accidentally, again, I did not know that I was triggering ketosis or anything like that, it was from Bulletproof Coffee. Bulletproof coffee is real, folks. I think the hype around Bulletproof coffee is very real. It's something that I've kind of fallen off the wagon on and I'm coming back onto. It is very real. The reason why I started doing Bulletproof coffee was because I heard that it was a natural form of Adderall. The idea here being that when you pair the caffeine with the fat, it slows down the digestive process of the caffeine and you get this slow burn. For myself personally, I found that to be true. I found that it's not as good as Adderall or whatever, but it definitely helped. It definitely helps with your stress. I would say that's another major reason for Bulletproof coffee is if you are consuming a lot of caffeine, you may not realize the effect it has on your anxiety. Bulletproof coffee will lower the anxiety that you have because you're not getting blasted with that caffeine all in one go. It also just makes more logistical sense rather than drinking one giant cup of coffee throughout the day or whatever and it getting cold or anything like that. You're basically consuming that one cup of coffee, but having the effects of it go burn through you over the course of a few hours. Absolutely, I would recommend it. Now, didn't know that the whole point of Bulletproof coffee was actually to trigger ketosis. So what do I experience when I start doing Bulletproof coffee? Similar effects to what I described when I was eating 2 pounds of meat in one sitting. But obviously a way healthier version of that. My struggles with crashing and hunger all day started to go away very quickly. And what really did for me was when I found out, wait, why am I not as hungry after Bulletproof coffee? Again, I thought it was the calories. And, it's a tablespoon of butter or what have you. So it's a lot of calories. I mean, you don't have to put that many. In fact, I don't recommend starting off with that many. But you're consuming extra calories than you would with the coffee. And I started wondering, well, why am I not as hungry all day? And it turns out, it's because you're triggering ketosis pretty much automatically, okay? The reason why people recommend putting MCT oil or coconut oil, I just use butter, but MCT oil in your coffee is because it goes through that portal vein, goes straight to your liver, and it triggers ketosis. For more details, I'm not the guy to talk, refined details about ketosis and that process. I mean, maybe I will, maybe I'll do a video all about it. But right now, I'm just trying to get you to understand the ideas here and just so you can consider them. So it puts you into ketosis. The way I know, some people will actually measure their ketones and all that shit. I don't do any of that. The way I test if I'm in ketosis or not is just how do I feel when I'm fasting? It's pretty simple. If I eat refined carbohydrates or even like really sugary fruits like strawberries the night before, and then the next day I wake up and I'm going to try and fast. If I eat refined sugars the day before, I'm not going to be able to make that fast. I'm not going to be able to make it until 6 p.m. or until like a 24-hour fast, okay? Or a 36-hour fast, I should say. I'm usually going to crack by about lunchtime. If the day before, if I don't eat starches, refined sugars, anything like that, and then I wake up, I have my Bulletproof coffee, and I do a fast, I can make that. I can make it through. You feel very, very different. The way you feel hunger when you're in ketosis is extremely different. In fact, if anything, I would say it's pleasurable. I know it sounds kind of weird, but when I fast, and I do love fasting, and I recommend it for everybody, which we're going to get into in a moment. When I fast, I have this heightened awareness. I have this heightened focus. I don't know if everybody experiences this. I don't know if this is the universal experience, but a lot of people do. A lot of people report feeling really good when you fast. The people who report feeling hungry the whole time, I always tell them, when people tell me like, dude, I tried fasting, I couldn't do it. Don't eat refined sugars. Don't eat carbohydrates. Don't eat any pasta. Maybe eat a steak or whatever the day before, or eat something fatty and whole. Eat that the day before and then try and fast the next day. It's a totally different animal. If you add Bulletproof coffee into that, it's going to be way, way easier. So for me, ketosis was a way of getting free of the constant hunger and the struggle of feeling like I'm hungry all the time. My relationship with hunger has totally changed. And this is why I recommend it for everybody. Keto for me added so much body awareness. I realized the incredible degree of anxiety that I was getting from coffee And when I switched to bulletproof coffee, it's really important not to necessarily, I still drink coffee and I'll still drink iced coffee, but I'm now more aware of the effect that it's having. If I feel anxious, I don't just fully believe that I'm anxious. I understand now, oh, it's because I drank a ton of coffee and it's making me feel anxious. Okay. When you get stuck in a cycle for long enough, you start to lose your sense of self. If you just drink iced coffee every morning, you just start to think that you exist in a state of anxiety. But when you give yourself the experience of having a different state of mind because of bulletproof coffee or because of fasting or anything like that, you get to like stand outside of yourself almost and see how you really feel and what's really going on with your body. Ketosis and fasting made me really understand what was going on with my body previously. It made me understand that I was in a vicious cycle of being carbo dependent and constantly hungry and therefore constantly eating more than I needed to, and then just kind of stuck in that cycle, rinse and repeat, okay? That is my personal experience. Now, obviously, like I said, I do recommend keto, but just like anything else, there are pros and cons to this stuff. So, pros and cons of keto. Pros are, like I said, a legitimate enhancement for stamina-based sports. There's evidence that it may help with epilepsy. Again, check with your doctor. Don't necessarily come back to me about that. I'm not a doctor, and I don't know that much about, or I don't know anything about epilepsy. Many people find that they have a clearer mind when they're in ketosis. They have heightened sense of focus. Easier for people who don't have a sugar tooth. So this would be a non-bio factor. So if you already somebody like me and you don't have a sugar tooth, you're not consuming lots of refined sugars already. Like I said, I was before, but I didn't really have a sugar tooth. I'm not somebody that's constantly pounding pastries and ice cream. You already have that inertia. If you're already more of a savory person, you already got that inertia going for you. So keto might be easier for you. Easier for people who are sensitive to carbs or gluten. That's another no-brainer. If you have celiac, keto, there you go. You can't eat grains on keto, right? It's a restricted diet. You're cutting out carbs altogether, refined carbs altogether, I should say. Easier for people in general because just kind of like the carnivore diet, you could pretty much fit in anywhere. I'm sure there's some things that'll kick you out of ketosis. Wings, if they've got bread on them, that type of thing, you probably don't want to do that. People can go, keto is so big these days too. That's the other big thing is like you can go to Qdoba and get the keto bowl, right? Like keto is so big, you can really easily fit in. People like the sound of it more than they like other things because people like, really what it comes down to, restricted diet, cutting out variables. How do you get an energy deficiency by cutting out variables? Well, in the case of keto, they're basically saying this. Your temptations come from one of two places, fat and sugar. Protein, all the proteins that taste good, they taste good because of the fats that are in them. So just cut out the sugar, right? You cut out the sugar, you've cut out half the temptations. If you just say no more sugar, you've cut out half of all temptations in life, and you only have to deal with half of them. So if you're somebody like me and you already have an easier time cutting out the sugars, then that just makes perfect sense for you, okay? Able to get more nutrients in the carnivore diet because you're not entirely, for me, I don't get kicked out of ketosis if I eat salad, or some people may say broccoli, that type of thing. If you really want to get into the dirt with it or into the mud with it, then you start measuring your ketones, that type of thing. But for me, I think I've learned my body well enough to know that I can definitely eat salads. I can eat the tomatoes. I can probably eat a lot of, maybe not bananas, but there's certain fruits that I can eat and not get kicked out of ketosis. So that's up to you. You got to learn your body or you have to get, you just have to test yourself and measure your ketones. Other benefit is that keto pretty much forces you to eat whole foods because most processed foods are going to have tons and tons of sugar and garbage in them. So if you want to cut out all those variables, then and that also goes hand in hand with allergies, that type of thing. If you're having trouble with allergies or foods that are just making you feel bad, a restricted diet is going to help with that because of course you're just cutting out variables. If you cut out processed foods, you're not going to be eating any of the random chemicals that they're putting into this stuff or the random processes that they're putting into this stuff. What are the cons? Higher likelihood of kidney stones if you practice it too stringently. This is something, again, though, I should say almost all diets, if you practice too stringently, yeah, you're going to run into issues. Higher likelihood of kidney stones if you practice too stringently. Lack of fiber if you practice too stringently. Like I said, I eat salads. I recommend salads for everybody. Lack of nutrients if you practice too stringently. Too many omega-6s if you're not eating fish or you're not seeking out omega-3s. Again, omega-3s are a really, really big deal. It's one of the few things that you're going to hear me directly tell you to get. Get more omega-3s into your diet. It doesn't matter what the hell you are or what you're doing. If you are an American, you need more omega-3s in your diet. I dare you to have too many omega-3s. It is physically possible to get too many omega-3s into your diet, but if you live in America, you're probably not going to be able to make that happen. Okay. Biggest biofactor con that I found with keto is that it is definitely true that it will inhibit your explosivity. So for me, I like to play a lot of sports. I play soccer, mountain biking, basketball, and then weightlifting in general, right? If you want to do your big PR, keto is going to hurt that. And it just makes perfect sense. Anaerobic exercise is exactly that. It's not less efficient, but it's a totally different way of using oxygen and using your body. When you have you're basically what you're doing. The difference between anaerobic and aerobic is you're burning basically, when you're doing anaerobic exercise, you don't actually end up burning more calories than you would through aerobic, but you're actually burning through the fuel supply very inefficiently. The way I like to equate it would be like a car in the mountains. You're going to need, if you are higher up and you have less oxygen, your car is going to burn through a lot of gas to do the exact same thing because you're pairing oxygen with less oxygen with more gasoline to fuel these explosions. You're not exactly having explosions in your body, but the same thing would be said with anaerobic exercise. When you are moving, when you need to output energy quick enough that you cannot get oxygen, the respiratory system to keep up. If you cannot get enough oxygen in that short period of time, you're going to burn through a lot of fuel in a short period of time. Okay. It doesn't end up, you're not burning more calories because your body ends up recycling afterwards. The fuel that has been broken apart and isn't used, your body ends up recycling that later. But in that short time when your body's like, we got to lift 800 pounds or whatever the hell you're trying to do, you're burning through your glycogen stores. You're burning through basically everything that your cells in your muscles can possibly get a hold of in a short period of time. That's one of the factors that goes into being explosive. Anaerobic would also include like sprinting, if it's like a short enough sprinting distance, probably like 40 to 100 meters, jumping, explosivity in general. If you're trying to output enough energy that it exceeds your respiratory system's ability to supply oxygen, your body is going to do the anaerobic process rather than the aerobic process. And in order to do that, fat works very well with the aerobic process because this is why it works for stamina and that type of thing, is because it's a nice, slow process. You take a couple steps, you're still breathing. Your respiratory system can keep up with the energy output. And so you can very cleanly go through this process of pairing oxygen with the fuel. Sorry about the gross lack of details. I don't know if you actually wanted them, and sorry about making myself sound like an idiot by not having the details, but hopefully you get the general idea. Okay, so yes, keto will inhibit your explosivity, and I definitely experienced that firsthand. And that's a big part of the reason why I kind of gave up a little bit on keto. For me, I don't know how fast I am. I haven't actually tested myself in a long, long time, but I play a lot of soccer and I'm pretty fast. And I definitely noticed a difference in my speed when I was doing full keto. So that is a major drawback. If you want that performance advantage, yeah, you're going to need a little bit of carbs. It doesn't mean you have to eat bread. Doesn't mean you have to eat pasta. You can eat fruits and vegetables, but yeah, you're gonna need some carbohydrates if you want to excel in explosiveness. I would counter that my pet theory is that if you give your body long enough, it may actually be able to come back around and you may be able to catch up through keto. But I'm not a scientist and I don't have the ability to test that theory. But and I also don't want to test that theory for now. So yes, if you're a soccer player, if you're a basketball player, if you want to be those things, if you want to play an explosive sport, if you want to be a volleyball player, yeah, you might have to not necessarily completely cut out of keto, but you are going to have to supplement with a certain degree of what I would recommend is whole food sources for carbohydrates, like fruits and vegetables. Vegetarianism. Okay, this is another. All of these diets, they kind of have a similar selling point in that they all seem like intuitive. Why is vegetarianism intuitive? Well, first of all, let me explain that there's two different types of vegetarians. There's vegetarians that are actually healthy, and then there's vegetarians that, I don't know, maybe they don't want to eat meat because of cruelty to animals. I'm not here to talk about that. I don't care. That's between you and God and you and your politics or whatever. I'm not talking about the ethicalness of that. What I find is that the vegetarians that don't do it for health are usually not very healthy. And that's because there's a ton of unhealthy foods. In fact, most of the unhealthy foods that you can think of are vegetarian. Doritos, Nabisco products, everything you see in the center of the grocery store, most of it, Gatorade, sugar, alcohol, most of it is vegetarian. Okay, so you can absolutely be vegetarian and be totally unhealthy. That's a huge, huge myth. A lot of times people pair vegetarianism with being more healthy. It's only healthier if you make it healthier. The intuitive aspect of vegetarians being healthier is because, yeah, vegetables are healthy. They're really good for you. And this is part of the thing why I don't understand cutting them out altogether with like the carnivore diet. We are opportunistic animals. We're doing things that no other species has done before. And so in order to accomplish this, we need things that no other species has ever had. I mean, we are more intelligent and live longer than most other species. I'm gonna have to turn this light off. Give me 1 second. It's starting to strobe. You know, but for longevity, you got what? You got us, tortoises, parrots, whales. There's really not that many species that can kick it around as many as we can. Green sharks are like 300 years old. Good for them. I don't know how they do it. They'll have to tell us one day. But we humans, to be able to operate with these very big, expensive brains that use 20% of the calories that you consume and that we don't fully understand, to be able to do what we do for as long as we do, we need a lot of stuff. We need a lot of resources. And yeah, the idea of cutting out vegetables altogether just has always seemed very silly to me. So that's why a major part of the reason why it's so much more intuitive in terms of, you know, it being a healthy option. One thing I'd like to point out though is a lot of times people who are vegetarian, if they don't have basically vegetarian means that oftentimes they can eat dairy. If they are not into the anti-factory farming situation, there's obviously degrees to this, then they'll eat dairy. Dairy and products and all that are going to be high in fat. And so that might help you with satiation or certain situations. But just keep in mind that, ice cream and things like that, they're going to be extremely calorically dense. And so it's very easy to get away from the energy deficit, right? If you're trying to lose weight or if you're trying to maintain weight loss. Reason why it's just so intuitive is because most good things in life, in nature, you can get from vegetables. There's pretty much, other than iron you need, right? But other than that, you can pretty much get everything you need from vegetables. Amino acids. Just think about it. It's very intuitive, right? Like why do oxen, right? I think in that one documentary, that propaganda video, vegetable-based propaganda video, I think it was called Game Changers or something like that. There was a strong man that says, how do you get as strong as an ox without eating meat? And his answer was, have you ever seen an ox eat meat, right? Very intuitive, okay? Lots and lots of animals, no problem getting really, really big and strong. Elephants and all that off of just vegetation, okay? One of my biggest problems with the vegetarian diet is just the fact that people way oversell it. There's all kinds of vegetarian propaganda out there. The one that comes to my mind, the biggest one of all you see posts on Instagram, you see all kinds of crazy stuff. But the big one that I feel like everybody was talking about was the Game Changers documentary. And of course it didn't change the game. And it's got Arnold Schwarzenegger in it. It's got all these people in it saying that vegetarianism will change your life, or the vegetable or the vegan plant-based. That's what they say, plant-based. The plant-based, that's the new word. Plant-based diet will change your life. And the weirdest part about that whole documentary for me was when they get this guy who is a scientist and he's really fucking weird and creepy about it. And he claims that plant-based diets will make your dick 300% harder, or 3 times harder. And he's got these like weird little like cock ring things that he puts on these athletes, and he's like super into it in like, I thought, like a really creepy way. And he's like, huh, yeah. And he puts like they didn't show him put the cock rings on him, but basically these guys put cock rings on their dicks. They go to sleep, and then they have erections in the middle of their sleep. And he's like, yeah, see, you had the meat, and your flaccid little dick couldn't handle it. And you didn't have meat, and your dicks are 3 times hard. Like, he's like super, super into this, and he's like really excited. And he acts like this is like a real, like, yeah, like this is a hard fact, and everybody knows this. Immediately, I mean, I think I was kind of hanging in there for most of the documentary. That's when I like screamed at the television, bullshit. You mean to tell me this species has been around for thousands and thousands of years? Guys will do anything to their dicks. Guys will put their dicks in vacuum tubes. Guys will do anything to have a harder dick. Think about Viagra, okay? All that shit. And you're telling me that we never tried vegetarianism? We never tried plant-based diets? Like, no guy ever noticed, like, wait, if I try the plant-based diet, wait, my dick's like a little bit harder. I don't think, not only, basically, we would know. It's physically impossible. We would know if the plant-based diet made your dick 3 times harder. There would be no question about it, okay? I mean, if men didn't figure it out, women would have. Women would have been like, you know, if like for most of history, women did the cooking. Guys would be like, "Where's all the meat? Where'd all the meat go?" And girls would be like, "Oh, sorry, I'm so clumsy. I burnt it." Because women would know if there was like a couple of days when they didn't have meat, they would be like, "Wait a second, that dude's dick was way harder when he doesn't eat meat." Women, if women couldn't not feed us meat, then men would be selectively bred out. Like, non-vegetarians would be selectively bred out. You'd have like every woman moving to India or whatever, unless there's just, I mean, sure, there's a major advantage when it comes to, eating meat and maybe being more successful or whatever at like hunting foods or just being better at farming or whatever, because it's more calorically dense. But otherwise, yeah, like, we wouldn't even have the option, right? If it was 3 times harder, right? If your dick is 3 times harder, if you're on a plant-based diet, everybody would know about it. It wouldn't be a question. There wouldn't be nothing. This guy would not be putting on cock rings on dudes in 2020 or 2019 or whatever the fuck that documentary was on. We would just know. It would just be out, and it would be a whole thing. In that documentary, they started saying crazy shit. The guy was like, he was doing battle ropes, and he's like, yeah, last time I did this, I could only do it for like 10 minutes. This time, I did it for like an hour and a half. It's because of like plant-based diet. I mean, he didn't stop. He's like, basically stopped when I was bored. I probably, like, if I wanted to, I could probably do it for like forever, I think. Like, he basically said that. He said he stopped out of pure boredom, and if I remember correctly, he said he thought he could do it for like 8 hours or something like that. Okay, plant-based diets do not give you superpowers. They showed this one guy, he was like 60 years old, and he had like 6-pack abs and all this. He's like, yep, it's all because of plant-based diet. And the guy's like, really? He's like, yep, plant-based diet. Because you're like 60. Yep. Just nothing but plants. You're bigger than like most linebackers. Fucking plants, dude. That's it. Nothing else. Literally nothing else. So you've never taken like steroids or anything like that? Nah, man. It's just plants. I just eat plants. That's it. Like, Arnold Schwarzenegger was acting like, oh, he could have totally been himself. He could have totally won Mr. Olympia, whatever it was, 7 times or whatever he did on just a plant-based diet. Plant-based diets do not give you superpowers, okay? It makes a lot of sense. I don't think it's bad for you, especially if you're eating whole foods. Plant-based diets make a whole lot of sense. They do not make you superhuman. It does not turn you into Batman, okay? Like, I don't know what the hell happened with veganism and vegetarianism, where for some reason they went from like, hey, this is better for animals, or hey, this might be good for you too. It gives you superpowers, bro. Your dick is gonna be 3 times harder. You're gonna do battle ropes for 9 hours, and you're gonna look like a fucking god when you're 60 years old, dude. It doesn't do any of that shit. Vegetarianism doesn't do any of that. It's just like a diet. It's probably good for you. If you eat whole foods, you'll probably eat less calories. It's probably going to make you live a little bit longer. I would say you should probably still incorporate meats, especially if you're a woman, because most times women are deficient in iron. Iron is difficult to get from fruits and vegetables. It's a lot easier to get from red meats. But just like anything else, there's pros and cons. Pros of the vegetarian diet. Most diverse diet, right? I mean, think about how many different types of meat there are, and think about how many different types. I mean, you can eat any kind of meat. You could eat a koala bear if you wanted to, but that'd probably be illegal, and you'd probably get shot by like Hugh Jackman, right? Don't do that. But you can eat. I mean, if you go to the grocery store and you compare the different kinds, there's okra, there's all kinds of shit that like, anything you want to eat, kale, things that like collard greens, things that are supposed to be decorative. You can eat that. Okay, there's so many different kinds of things you can eat. Easier for people who are already eating vegetables. That'd be a NonBio factor. If you already have that inertia, some people were raised eating not that much meat and mostly vegetables. Good for you. You can just hop right into that. Very easy to cover most of your nutrients. This would be a biofactor. The vegetarian lifestyle is definitely very nutritious. If you're eating whole foods and not Doritos and not Twinkies and not Coca-Cola, yeah, you can cover a lot of nutrients. Okay, fiber. Hopefully you were paying attention when I went through that whole diatribe about fiber. That's probably the biggest one. I mean, for me, that's basically the biggest reason. And we're going to talk about this more. I encourage everybody to eat salad. That's basically one of the few things that I'm like directly, eat salad. There's not that many things, especially in diet, that I'm going to directly tell you to do. Eat omega-3s. Eat salad. Biggest reason why you should eat salad, and as far as I'm concerned, is fiber, right? You're gonna make that whole pooping process, folks. It goes so much smoother. If you start eating, you want that green poop. That's really what you want, folks. You want that green poop. You want to eat so much salad. You want to eat so many vegetables that you have an excess of vegetation and nutrients, and it just comes out green. When it comes out green, that's when you know you're good, folks. You're not going to get clogged up. You're not going to get constipated. You're probably not going to have diarrhea. It means you're doing good. That's a good sign. Green means go, right? Green means go, folks. You want to eat enough salad, enough vegetables that you got that nice, smooth shit sliding out. You don't got to worry about it. It doesn't cling to the sides or anything like that. Not too gooey, not too clumpy, just nice and perfect. I told you, I warned you folks, I was going to talk about poop. Poop is a part of diet. And I'm right. I'm right. How many times have you ever gone to the bathroom and you're like, damn it, I wish this shit would come out? Or vice versa, you wish it would just come out nice, right? It's something that people don't talk about, but it's real. And it's a real pain in the ass. I'm sorry about that. But you get the point. Is like, like I said, butthole health is real. Taking a shit is real. And it would be nice if it could just come out nice and smooth. And that's one of the absolute biggest reasons why I support consuming vegetables and consuming more vegetables. You're not going to get that from the carnivore diet. You're not going to get that from the keto diet. By the way, I forgot to mention, keto can also give you diarrhea because of lipase. Lipase, ASE, it ends in ASE, means it's an enzyme, and it's what you use it's the enzyme you use to tackle fats. You have to build lipase up in order to consume more fats. And a lot of times people eat more fat than their body can consume or digest quickly or break down. And so what do they get? They get diarrhea. You don't have that when you're eating vegetables. I mean, if you eat bad vegetables or if you're having an allergic reaction, otherwise, yeah, it's got fiber. It's going to hold that shit together. And it comes out nice and buttery smooth. Lighter food allows for more energy. So you've probably heard this, eating light for lunch. So this would be kind of a biofactor, right? So because salads and vegetables are they're very low in caloric density. Okay, most like cucumbers, Bananas are like 90 calories each. That's a lot of space to only take up 90 calories. That much space on anything else would take up at least 3 times as many calories. Think about that in the shape of a hamburger. Okay. Means you're filling up your stomach. You get the sensation of fullness, which is the second biggest reason why I encourage people to eat salad. You're filling up on calorically calorically dense food, and you're burning through that. And the sensation that you get is the sensation of lightness, right? So if you feel in the middle of the day, right? So going back to the example I talked about, doing your HIIT workout, what do you want to do? Do you want to eat a roast beef before your HIIT workout, or do you want to eat a smoothie? Well, let's just do it again. Do you want to have a roast beef, or do you want to have a salad? That's what I do. Is I typically would eat like a salad, okay? Because even though you can fill yourself up completely full, and you cannot stuff any more down your throat, it is still light enough that you can probably get right back out there. That's actually, I try not to eat right before bed, but if I absolutely have to eat before bed, I eat a salad. And I'll eat a big one. I'll eat a huge salad right before going to bed. And so that I have that sensation of being totally full, but it's complete, you feel totally light as well, right? Like you're light on your toes and you can run around, no problem. So that's a big one for people, is that light sensation throughout the day is really good. The only way you could get that from meats would be from like turkey, like deli meat, tuna, fish, chicken, maybe if you don't consume too much. Nothing deep fried, obviously, but that light food that's a little bit easier to, or I should say it's low caloric density, right, is a lot easier for your body to digest while you're walking around and going through your day, and so you can be more productive in the afternoon, okay? Helps lower blood pressure. That's another major pro. And then, of course, I would say it does. So I don't want to get too much into environmentalism, because I feel like a lot of that stuff, you think you're being environmentally friendly and then it turns out you're not, or whatever. But a lot of people argue that vegetarianism is better for the environment. The planet probably was not designed for as many chickens. There's more chickens than there are humans. So it doesn't make sense that there are as many chickens as there are. And of course, if you're consuming more meat, then you're going to be encouraging the industry. And then, of course, they're going to be making more animals, which is going to make more CO2. I don't want to get into the science of environmentalism, because it feels like, to me, it's always a catch-22. But that is something to consider. I'd say that's a pro, is that more vegetables. Here's the cons. Less omega-3s. Did I mention that you should get more omega-3s? Get more omega-3s. Low in B vitamins. That's a big one for energy as well. Vegetarian or plant-based diet is low in iron. I already mentioned that. For women, that's a big deal. Another con is processed garbage, right? So again, there's two different types of vegetarians. There's the ones that do it for health, and the ones that do it for health, they probably get a lot of success out of that. The ones that don't do it for health are just back where you started, right? You can eat all kinds. You can eat Lay's potato chips. You can eat French fries. The amount, deep fried onions, canola oil, the amount of garbage, most processed garbage is vegetable based, because it's cheaper. And that's what these companies care about, is they care about their bottom line. They don't care about how your body reacts unless you're eating more. They don't care about your consequences afterwards. They don't care about your doctor visits. They don't care about anything. They care about their bottom line. And because vegetables are cheaper for the most part than grains and things like that, because they're cheaper than meats, they're going to pump that into as much stuff as possible, sugars as well. And and so you can absolutely be just as sick off of the vegetarian lifestyle or the plant-based lifestyle as anything else, really. Okay. Another con would be more difficult to maintain muscle mass unless you're really strict and really smart about it. And I mean really, really smart about it. May lead to lower testosterone. I know a lot of people hate testosterone these days. I don't, and I don't think anybody should. I think testosterone is good for everybody, men and women. But there is some truth to be said about the vegetarian lifestyle lowering your testosterone. Biggest con I already said is that it's just way overhyped, folks. It's not going to make your dick harder. It's not going to make your dick 3 times harder, folks. I can I can guarantee that, okay? It isn't going to make you do battle ropes for 9 hours. I've had that experience. Everybody's had that experience. If you work out enough, you have that experience where for whatever reason, one day you're just randomly stronger or can do something crazy, okay? One time I went in to do a squat and I added 50 pounds to my squat out of nowhere, okay? And I still don't exactly know what happened that day. Some days that happens. Some days you go to the gym and you're just a freak. Some days you go to play soccer or whatever and you're just a freak and something has come out of you and you don't know what it is. I'm not going to tell you that vegetables are going to add 50 pounds to your squat and make your dick 3 times harder and make you do battle ropes for 8 hours or whatever nonsense, okay? It's not true. You're not going to get superpowers. If it was, I mean, again, it's no different than your dick being hard. We would objectively know that. There would be every Olympic athlete, Usain Bolt, Michael Phelps, if it was that big of an advantage, there would be no question about it. The results that they pretend that they get from vegetarian plant-based lifestyle are so extreme, it would be impossible to not notice that. To know like what's coming out of, whoa, the Russians are vegetarian or whatever. The Indians are vegetarian. Wait, they're running twice as fast or 20% faster or whatever the hell, what it would be to get the results that these people pretend that they do when they're doing their propaganda on Facebook or these shitty documentaries. It would be so obvious. There would be no questioning about it. You would already know. It would be common knowledge. Vegan, pretty similar, so I'm going to go through this real quick. Pros of the vegan lifestyle. One of the strongest social communities. Bet you didn't see that one coming, especially because I was just shitting all over them. All the same benefits as the vegetarian lifestyle. Cons, some performance hindrances, unless of course you're really scientific and smart about it. Even more difficult than vegetarianism, it can make it difficult to fit into societal, into society, right? So that would be a non-bio factor. If you can't stick with it, it's not going to work. So the vegan lifestyle, everybody's heard the whole situation of bringing a vegan to Thanksgiving dinner, that type of thing. People will make fun of you. It can be difficult to stick with it. If you're doing it for health, it may not be worth it for that reason, okay? Even more processed foods than vegetarianism. This is one of the biggest ones. Yeah, I would say both vegetarianism. One of the biggest things about the vegan lifestyle that I don't understand is them acting like it's healthy while they're also then consuming tofu and Impossible burgers and all that shit. Look, it only makes sense if you're doing it for health and not for ethical reasons, which I think most vegans are doing it for ethical reasons. But if you're doing it for health, the only way it works is if you're eating whole foods. If you think that you're being healthy because you're eating an Impossible burger, you might as well be eating Twinkies. That's the most processed shit you can possibly imagine. Think about the fact that they are doing experiments on this stuff to this day. They're trying to figure, this is so lab designed that to this day they're doing Impossible Meats 3, like it's the sequel to Impossible Meats 2, okay? Like that is how cutting edge this is. This is not some process, this is not canola oil. This isn't something that they came up with 100 years ago. This is so processed that they're still coming up with this as they go right now, okay? Have you ever seen how they make tofu? If you see how they make tofu, you're not going to eat tofu. It looks no different than the McNuggets at McDonald's, okay? People like to show all the crazy stuff that McDonald's does to their food and all the crazy stuff. All the same weird stuff you see them doing for McNuggets and the McRib and Doritos and all that stuff, they're doing that for all those crazy vegan things too. All the weird coconut oils, all the weird supplements they're doing to try and make it taste like real dairy. Oh, wow, we finally made something that tastes like real dairy. Okay? Think about what they're having to do. And again, remember, external processing means less internal processing. So if you're eating whole foods, you are going to burn through some of those calories to eat those whole foods. If you're eating highly processed foods, you're going to burn through a lot less of those calories to get those externally processed or digested foods, okay? Last one I'm going to get to before I get to the big one, fasting and intermittent fasting and all that, is the Mediterranean diet. Mediterranean diet is the sexiest diet, and it's also the best one, pretty much. So the Mediterranean diet in the world of nutrition is more or less the only one that is really scientifically backed. It's backed to most likely help you improve your health span and your longevity, although there's a lot of other factors that go into that. But the biggest thing, though, is that it has been demonstrated to show help with cognitive performance. It is very rich in antioxidants. The Mediterranean diet is when you eat lots of fish, lots of olive oil, lots of omega-3s. Did I mention eat more omega-3s? It's kind of a rich people's diet. It's a little bit more expensive, so that would be the con. It's a lot more difficult because it's so heavy in fish. It's a lot more difficult for inland folks. In general, though, the Mediterranean diet, yeah, it works. I mean, if, a lot of those people still are eating, if they're still going to eat a lot of cheese, but if you're talking about like a true Mediterranean diet, there's probably not going to be as much pasta. There's probably not going to be as much refined carbohydrates. It's probably going to be a lot of plants, a lot of olive oil, a lot of fish, and just ultimately a lot of omega-3s, which is really good for countering inflammation and countering heart disease. The Mediterranean diet is probably one of the few diets that I don't really have any problems with, other than the fact that it's expensive. And it's one of the few diets where the hype is truly real. I mean, they all have pros and cons, but the Mediterranean has very few. Social backing, like I said, inertia of what you're already eating. Mediterranean in America might be more difficult because, again, it's expensive. And then also, America likes to eat cows and pigs. If you want to get fish in America, especially if you're inland, it can get kind of risky. You're basically getting deep fried foods, or you're getting mall sushi, so it can get kind of risky. Other than that, though, and not as difficult as, like, for example, the vegan lifestyle. No one's going to be like, oh, you brought a Mediterranean diet person to Thanksgiving. Like, most people are you're probably going to be able to fit in relatively well. The biggest one I'm going to talk about before I talk about what I really recommend you do, but the biggest one would be fasting and intermittent fasting. This is what I'm currently doing. I'm currently doing intermittent fasting. I'm basically doing a feeding window of about probably 12 to 8 or like 11 to 7 or 11 to 8, but basically an 8-hour feeding window. I feel great. I've been doing this. I fast all the time. I've been doing this for years. This is probably the final frontier, and as far as I'm concerned, when it comes to dieting. I think that fasting and intermittent fasting is probably the key to unlocking a lot of different things. The biggest thing is, like I said in the very beginning, is that bullshitters are usually trying to sell you something. And the reason why I like intermittent fasting and fasting is that there's really not a whole lot to sell you. I mean, you could sell a book, you could sell t-shirts, or like I'm doing, but there's no diet, there's no supplement. You can't sell not eating. There's no physical thing, there's no consumer product for not eating. And that's why when I started hearing about intermittent fasting and fasting in general, I just immediately was like, okay, I'm all ears, because you can't get conned out of just the idea of not really eating. Now, what's the real advantage to it? Well, I've already talked about how it made me feel better. I talked about how it changes your relationship with food, and that's very important. You're getting more self-awareness, you're getting more body awareness, and you're starting to think about food very differently. When you go to the grocery store fasted, it's very, very different. You feel like a Buddhist monk. You feel like you are looking at consumerism from an external perspective. When, for me, the sensation that I get from fasting, I can only describe as ethereal. It's like I'm on a drug. It's so weird. Some people have also talked about this. It is really weird. It feels like I'm high on a drug. Not crazy high, not like cocaine or whatever, but just a nice, gentle high. And I feel like when I'm at the grocery store, I'm picking up foods and I'm looking at them objectively. And I'm going, do I really need this? Do I really need to put this in my body? Keep in mind, it is a proven fact that when you go to the grocery store hungry, when you go to the grocery store with low blood sugar, you will buy more than you need. Everybody already knows this. Hopefully you already know this. If you're not, you're in trouble. But you're going to buy way more than you need when you go to the grocery store with low blood sugar. Okay? You will actually go, if you go to a clothing store, you'll buy more than you need. If you buy book binders, you will literally buy more book binders. That's not a joke. They tested this with book binders. People with low blood sugar will buy more book binders than they need. For whatever reason, when your blood sugar is low, your decision-making goes out the window and you just start consuming more and more of anything. Jeans, jackets, doesn't matter. When you're fasting, For me, at least, and I think for a lot of other people, it's the exact opposite. Once you are not your first time fasting, not your second time fasting, once you have established this process and you've gotten good at it and you know your body well enough to know, what to eat the day before you do a 36-hour fast or anything like that, you know your body. To me, it feels ethereal. I'm more focused. I have a clear head about what I'm going to do. I play sports sometimes I should say when I play sports fasted, I'm way worse. But in my experience, when I play sports fasted, I play the best that I possibly can play. Don't fully understand why. I'm not exactly sure how it's possible, but I just feel light. I feel focused. I feel like I'm in the game. No problem. I hugely recommend playing sports fasted and trying it. I've done weightlifting fasted. I've broken personal records fasted with weightlifting. I've done now. One thing I will say, same thing with intermittent fasting, just like with vegetarianism. Sometimes people oversell it. Okay, aerobic, what do they call it? Fasted cardio. Yeah, you're not going to burn more calories. That's not even the whole point. The point of fasting is not to burn more calories. It's an energy deficit. So you're basically just you're burning the same basal rate of calories that you would normally. You're just consuming less calories. Sometimes people think that you're burning extra calories if you do cardio while you're fasted or while you weightlift fasted. You're not going to do that. I do think that you have more cognitive performance, better cognitive performance. I do think that I personally experience physical better performance. I'm not a scientist. I haven't done studies on this. It might be a placebo. But it has happened enough times to me that I feel like I'm noticing a pattern. But the biggest reason why I love fasting and intermittent fasting for everybody is autophagy. And folks, this is where, I think this is one of the first steps in nutrition that is becoming a hard science. The guy who discovered this got a Nobel Prize, so that should tell you something. What is autophagy? The simplest way of explaining it is that it's self-cleaning. So just like anything else in life, there's times of building and there's times of maintaining. What we have done culturally is with the constant eating in the morning for breakfast, eating dinner, eating lunch in the order that you're supposed to eat them, not what I just said, eating dessert later. By constantly eating, not only are we fucking up our insulin levels and everything like that, but you're not giving your body the opportunity to maintain. You're just saying build. But your body's going to make errors. It's going to make mistakes. You're going to have traumas in your body that need to be repaired. And it needs time to stop focusing on the digestive process and focusing on the maintenance process. And that's what autophagy is. And this is not some Gwyneth Paltrow bullshit. Autophagy is a real thing. It is the process of your body cleaning cells, getting rid of dead tissue, getting rid of dead cells. And how should I say this? The effects of this are about as wide as they get. So, a lot of times you'll hear these things like, oh, red wine will, it'll help prevent dementia and cancer. And once they've listed more than two things, you're like, okay, that's bullshit. There's no way it does that many different things. Autophagy might be one of the few things that affects a lot of different things. Autophagy may be able to help prevent certain kinds of cancer or a lot of different kinds of cancer. Along with, you can't really prevent dementia, but delay the process of dementia, and essentially it could probably prevent, or I believe it is possible that it can prevent certain kinds of autoimmune disorders like arthritis. Why? Why is that? Well, if you listen to my other podcasts, you've heard me talking about the fact that all organic processes are a series of feedback loops. And if you think about it, it just makes sense. Your body needs to have time to maintain itself. It needs to have time to go into every single cell and clean out dead tissue, errors that may have occurred, and get rid of them and evacuate them out of your body. Kill bad cells, find cancers, and destroy them. And that is a process. That is an organic process. And it's a feedback loop. Just like you need to be good at whatever it is, driving a car, right? You have a feedback loop for that. You have millions of feedback loops for that. If you're going to drive a car every day, you need to have a series of different feedback loops in your physical body, in your nervous system, in your mind, of feedback loops that maintain the skill set of driving. If you lose that skill set, you'll drive into a tree and you'll die. If you inhibit the process of autophagy, then it increases the odds that the process of autophagy will essentially atrophy and you'll no longer be good at it. You'll no longer be good at the self-cleaning process. If you're not good at the self-cleaning process, a couple of different things can happen. You can get an autoimmune disorder in which the body no longer recognizes the difference between an injury or good tissue, right? Or functioning tissue. And so it starts to consume that tissue that is already good for you, right? That's fine. That doesn't need to be repaired. This could be like arthritis or dementia, right? Where your body starts to consume tissue and never ending this process of just consuming and eating itself. Okay. In the case of cancer, it may not be good at detecting cancers anymore because it doesn't have that practice, because you haven't given it the window of time that is required to self-clean. And so eventually your body is no longer good at autophagy. And so these different processes, these different diseases start to occur because, well, you're just getting sloppy essentially. And again, nature doesn't care about you after you've procreated and you've raised children. So eventually something's going to get you. The only way you can live forever is if we start coming out with crazy medical inventions and discoveries. And even if we do, there's just going to be new things we're going to have to discover. There'll be new things that'll kill us. Even if we solve cancer, even if we solve dementia, there's going to be new problems that we'll discover that we'll have to fix. But to me, there is science behind this, and it is also very intuitive that autophagy is a major component that is important for my goal of being able to live 120 years and kick a soccer ball around and run around no problem. You need to be able to repair your own body, and your body needs to be good at it. If it's bad at it, then it's not going to detect diseases like cancers, or it's going to consume itself in the case of like arthritis and that sort of thing. This is why I tell people you can do all kinds of different stuff. You can do vegetarian, you can do carnivore, you can do whatever. But one of the few things I directly tell people is I think you should definitely get into intermittent fasting and fasting. I'm not trying to overhype it. I'm not saying it's even going to cure cancer or anything like that. But there is evidence that, or at least theoretical evidence, that it may inhibit these issues. And I think they make sense. But if nothing else, even if autophagy is not, or autophagy as some people pronounce it, if autophagy is not all of the hype. I mean, the thing about autophagy is it's a process that exists in your body for the exact reason. Autophagy is something that you need. It's something that all animals have. It's just that if you're eating too much, you're getting less autophagy versus if you're eating more, if you eat less, you get more of a window for your body to do autophagy. So for example, intermittent fasting, really the only way you can kick your body into autophagy is when you're in like a 12 to 14 hour window. There may be some detriment after about 16 hours. That's something to consider. There's other reasons to go longer though, if that's up to you, of course. But if you're going for autophagy, you probably want to go for that 12 to 16 hour window. After 16 hours, you might start to get cortisol pumping through your veins, which is the stress hormone, and that's going to have all kinds of negative side effects and that type of thing. But yeah, if you want to that autophagy, then yeah, it makes sense to essentially fast for 12 to 14 hour windows. That's pretty easy, folks. Just think about it. Don't eat for 12 hours. Or in my case, I'm trying to not eat for 16 hours. And there's a whole lot of other reasons. Actually, I was just listening to Daniel Huberman talk about how if you give your liver more time between feeding windows, the inflammation in your liver will dramatically drop. I don't fully understand that process. That's something I'm going to have to learn about. There are other reasons. It helps with sleep. I would say it helps with mood stability, helps with dopamine stability, because you're not constantly jacking your dopamine up via food and insulin crashes, that sort of thing. But if you're doing it for autophagy, guys, that's super easy, 12 to 14 hours. You cannot eat for 12 to 14 hours. You're sleeping for 8 of that, hopefully. If you sleep for 8 hours, add 4 hours to that, maybe skip lunch, whatever that is going to be. There you go. You're at 12 hours. And that will probably really work in your favor over the course of your life. And then if you're not bought on this autophagy concept just yet, I would say the body awareness that you will develop in fasting and intermittent fasting is leaps and bounds. You're going to learn so much about your body. You're going to learn about the relationship you have with food. You're going to learn about, I cannot preach the importance of body awareness enough. It's one of the major components of critical fitness is learning about yourself, learning about your body, learning about how your body responds to food. And this is a major component of it. Trying to understand, I mean, you hopefully were paying attention when I talked about my whole journey with insulin sensitivity and everything like that. And in hindsight, it's obvious to me, but when you're in the moment, when you're just habitually doing the same thing over and over again for years, it can be difficult to realize what kind of cycle you've trapped yourself in. So fasting is a great way to break that cycle and really understand what is your relationship with food and what you need to actually be eating, right? What is making you miserable throughout the day. That would be the last diet. And I do, like I said, there's only going to be a handful of things that I actually recommend. You can choose between carnivore. My recommendation would be, like I said, we're opportunistic eaters. So, if you want to do a restricted diet for a certain period of time, I think that makes sense. If you do it for 20 years, you're probably going to start to see some drawbacks. But what's the biggest thing? What's the biggest pro or con to all of these diets? It's something that I essentially have not talked about at all. And that is your social life. And this is the big thing that I don't think people really understand. In America, food has become a part of our identity. This is what I talked about in the very beginning. And people are making like tribes around food, around keto, around veganism. That's probably the strongest one, around carnivores. And one of the things that's strange about that is that's a good thing, right? I would say, again, I think it's shallow. Like I said from the very beginning, it's shallow to wrap food as part of your identity. But it's not bad to have a community behind you. Because the number 2 health tip I tell people is your social life. That always confuses people. The first 2 always confuse people. The first fitness tip from Critical Fitness that I always give people is improve the quality of your sleep. A lot of times people think that when I say sleep is number 1 and social life is number 2, they think that there's probably like a nice partition, right? A nice even partition between 1 and 2. No, they're neck and neck. The only reason why I put sleep above social life is because sleep affects everything. It affects your motivation. It affects your willpower. It affects your ability, how you treat people and everything like that. So lack of sleep will hurt your social life. But social life is huge when it comes to health and the success of health. Just think about it, right? Why do we make these tribes? It's because it makes it easier. When you think about what's the most intense tribe, the hardest one, veganism. That's the most difficult diet to maintain. And what's the one that has the strongest community? Veganism. So if you say you're gonna lose weight or try and be healthy by switching to the vegan lifestyle, you probably will have some success with it if you join that community, right? And those people can get kind of rabid, but if you join that community, yeah, you have people backing you. They don't even have to be there in person, but if you on the internet, you have people encouraging you, your success is going to be so much greater. That's just talking about like on the internet or a friend or whatever. Some of these people, like if you join a vegan commune, hell yeah, you're going to stay vegan. You're absolutely going to stay vegan. Imagine if you get in like a vegan orgy. Come on. Like there's no coming out of that. Once you're in a vegan orgy, you are never leaving that lifestyle. You're in way too deep. I don't think there's ever been a person that joined in a vegan orgy and then comes out and goes, guys, so I was thinking. Nobody does that. Like nobody, once you're in it, you are in it. And that is really the biggest determining factor with your success, both in health, but also in a restricted diet, is your lifestyle, your social lifestyle. If you're surrounded by people who do not take health seriously or do not take dieting seriously, that is going to dramatically inhibit the odds of your success on a restricted diet. You can do it. Some people can do it. Some people have that discipline. But if you've ever wondered, why do you need the discipline to begin with, right? You've probably heard the expression, you're the average of your 5 closest friends, yada, 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 all that stuff. Well, I mean, it's all true, right? And a lot of times people don't like that expression because it hurts. It hurts to think about your friends holding you back, but it's true. A lot of times the reason why you're in the predicament that you are to begin with is because your social life has been holding you back. The people around you live an unhealthy lifestyle, and rather than encouraging you to eat healthy along with them, they're encouraging you to eat unhealthy along with them. So why, these identities that people form around keto, around carnivore, they're very, very shallow, and I think it speaks volumes to the void that has occurred in American culture. Like I said, this podcast is primarily aimed at Americans and getting Americans moving. When we get bigger, we'll probably move into other countries. But here in America, I think our culture is dying. And I think there's a couple of different markers of that. One of the big markers of the cultural death of America is people forming these very shallow tribal unions because they can't bond. They need somebody to bond with about something, but they can't bond about whatever. They can't bond with their neighbor. They can't bond with the people around them. So they find something. And food is your lifestyle, right? I mean, it is a shallow thing, but when you're doing something habitually, right? When you're eating the same type of foods and maybe your life is hindered because you couldn't go to that Thanksgiving, or people made fun of you at Thanksgiving because you're a vegan and you only eat coconut milk instead of whatever. If people are making fun of you because of your lifestyle that you've chosen, then the only way you can keep pushing through that is with a social back. I shouldn't say the only way, but the biggest way that you can push through that is with a community behind you. And so when you have a bunch of rabid vegans behind you telling everybody that they're all unethical or they're stupid or whatever because of they're not vegan and they should be feeding their cats vegan, yeah, that's going to make you more successful. It's weird and it's kind of hilarious, but the reality is if you do the vegan lifestyle in the sense of eating raw foods and eating whole foods, you're probably going to have a decent amount of success if you join this community and have them pushing you behind you. The same thing could be said for any other diet. I'm just using vegans because that's the most obvious cultural, that's the biggest community that is the most intense in America. But you don't have to necessarily join a community, right? You don't have to go like, dude, I'm desperate, so I'm going to join veganism and I'm going to join a vegan commune and maybe I'll slip into one of those vegan orgies and lose 300 pounds. You don't have to do that as long as you're armed with the information that your social life has the biggest impact on your success of your health in terms of how you diet or everything like that. You can know everything about calories in, calories out. You can choose carnivore, you can choose vegetarian, you could choose keto, you could choose high carb bodybuilder. Why do you think bodybuilders are so successful? Because they hang out with other bodybuilders. Why do you think CrossFitters are so successful? Because they hang out with other CrossFitters. Why are the most rabid communities the ones that have the greatest saturation of success when it comes to getting their goals? Because they are backed by a community. Because when somebody's making fun of them for their lifestyle, they can go back to their other friend and just start making fun of them behind their back or whatever whatever it takes. Your social life is the biggest part of your diet. By far. It is so much bigger than Atkins. It is so much bigger. You got to think this isn't a 6-month journey. This isn't a year. This is your lifetime. So this is not a sprint, it's a marathon. Over the course of your life, you got to be making decisions going, what kind of people should I be hanging out with? Are these people taking the same things seriously that I want to be taking seriously? And if you've changed your mind about your identity and you decided, I don't want this lifestyle anymore, I don't want these types of foods that are hurting me, then slowly but surely, you're going to probably either need to get those people to change or you're going to need to move away and start hanging out with people other people who take that seriously. Because remember, at the end of the day, this is about you. And sometimes you do need to be a little bit selfish. And maybe your friends will see your success. Maybe if you lose a lot of weight, or maybe if you are building more muscle or whatever you're trying to do, if you have success with your diet, maybe your old friends will see you and maybe they'll decide, hey, what's going on? Wait, how did you do that? Right? And maybe they'll start asking you for tips, and maybe you can bring them back into the new community that you have found of people who eat healthy. But in the beginning, you might have to be selfish. You might have to be a little bit ruthless. You might have to go, depending on how extreme you are, you might have to kind of cut ties with people and maybe move to, in some cases, if it's bad enough, hell, you might have to move to a different city and make new friends, that type of thing. But just always remember that you can decide about calories in, calories out. You can talk about everything. But like I said from the very beginning, all diets are just Moneyball strategies. If you can cut out a variable, it'll give you a huge advantage. And variables compound over time. Your friends are a variable. Your lifestyle is a variable. And taking control of those variables will compound positively over your lifetime. So I cannot recommend this enough. Yeah, take what I said about these different diets, the pros and the cons. Consider the bio versus non-bio factors. Consider the 2 health filters. Consider if you're going for performance or maintenance. Consider that none of these will ultimately help you beat nature. But also, most importantly, focus on your social life and the impact that the social life has on your diet. This is the Critical Fitness Podcast. My name is Antonio. Like I said in the very beginning, if you made it this long and you want to support me, if you found this impactful, check out my website, projectcriticalfitness.com. Tell people about this podcast. Tell people about my YouTube channel. Tell people about my Instagram page, Project Critical Fitness. Give me a like. Give me a like on YouTube. Leave me a review on the podcast. But yeah, get the word out, folks. If you found this valuable, please share this with them. And as always, have a great workout.